Chapter 204. I was lucky enough to have a breakthrough, Zhao Lei replied. Zhao Lei responded before continuing. After entering the Lin family, I handed the envelope to Elder Lin Dong. After waiting for another day, I met with the Lin family patriarch, Lin Ryuan. The head of the Lin family was indeed an immortal. He could walk in the air and fly in the sky. In a flash, he rushed out of the sky and disappeared. Half an hour later, he flew back. Later, I heard that the head of the Lin family rushed to the Di family, which was 50 miles away from the Lin family's immortal mountain. He fought with the head of the Di family before rushing back. Ziyue, Wu Juanhao, and the others walked out of the meeting hall one after another. The following words gradually became unclear. The head of the Lin family, Lin Ryuan? He should be in the aperture enlightening stage. It's a bit exaggerated to be able to fly with his divine sense, but it's not difficult to drive a Dharma artifact to fly at a low altitude. Ziyue thought silently, and a trace of yearning appeared on his face. The aperture enlightening stage was not only a great leap in immortal spells, but also a metamorphosis of one's life. The old loose cultivator, Old Wu, was able to live to more than 130 years old because he practiced the eternal spring art. His maximum lifespan was 150 years. However, cultivators in the enlightened aperture state would undergo a metamorphosis. They would be free of pain and suffering, and could live up to 200 years old at the very least. If they knew how to maintain their health, it was not impossible for them to die without any illness at 250 years old. And this involved a topic that would make any emperor, commoners, and even living beings go crazy over: longevity. He had never heard of anyone who had truly obtained longevity. However, longevity was enough to make countless people yearn for it. Congratulations, Brother Wu. You can enter the Lin family. Your future is unimaginable. As soon as they left the meeting hall, Nie Jingtao hurriedly congratulated him. Brother Wu, please take care of me in the future. Another outstanding disciple, Wan Heng, said in a slightly flattering tone. Well said, well said. Wu Juanhao spoke modestly, but his face could not hide his excitement and pride. His eyes could not stop sizing up Ziyue. In the end, he could not help but say, Here, I still have to thank Brother Bai for being so generous and letting me have this opportunity. Brother Bai, let's go, I'll treat you to a drink at the Heavenly Fragrance Pavilion, how about it? No need, I still have something to do, so I won't disturb you. Ziyue slowly shook his head and refused. Let's go. It's rare for us to be so happy. Wu Juanhao continued to persuade. I really have something to do. Ziyue slowly shook his head and said, What? Brother Bai, are you not willing to give me face? Hearing this, Wu Juanhao's face changed, and he immediately lowered his voice, implying a threat. Give you face? Ziyue stood still and looked at him with a faint smile. If it weren't for Brother Bai giving in, how could you have obtained this opportunity? You're turning your back on us so quickly. You're truly despicable. You're really being looked down upon. Su Qiaoling snorted and looked at him with disdain. Then, she shook her head and left. Wu Juanhao was furious. Ziyue only glanced at him indifferently, and without saying anything, he turned and left. Only the three of them were left. They looked at each other and felt a little bored. The Golden Bell Shield is not only a hard body skill, but also a protective skill. Moreover, this is a skill that can only be practiced by those who have cultivated inner energy. There was indeed something unique about using internal energy to refine the body and temper it. However, the amount of internal energy required to cultivate this technique was extremely terrifying. The higher the level of the skill, the greater the consumption. According to the secret manual, it would take at least a month for a martial artist in the inner force realm to reach the beginner level of this cultivation technique. It would be difficult to reach the first level without a year of hard work. Not to mention, the higher the level of the skill, the longer the time required. Even the leader of the Scorching Sun Gang, Jiang Tao, who is a first-rate martial artist, spent 20 years and only reached the 7th level of this skill. Bai Ziyu flipped through the entire manual and began to ponder silently. There was no doubt that this protective skill was very powerful. However, the difficulty of practicing it was also very shocking. Martial artists of inner energy would need at least a month to master this skill. He was already at the peak of the 3rd rate. Even if the time required to master this skill would be slower, he would still need at least 10 days to half a month to master this skill. This was under the condition that he practiced diligently. If he relaxed, the time required to master this skill would be infinitely extended. Let's give it a try. Once I master this skill, it will be much easier to continue to improve. Bai Ziyu quickly made up his mind. The inner strength in his lower dantian gushed out in an instant. The cultivation method of the Golden Bell shield quickly flashed through his mind. The inner strength quickly flowed through his body, and countless tiny meridians began to circulate. Most of these small meridians were blocked. Before he could circulate the skill, he still needed to open up these meridians one by one. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, in a short 10 minutes, Ziyue's inner energy was completely exhausted. In contrast, in the circulation path of the Golden Bell cover, there were 2 small meridians that were opened up by him. In the next few days, Ziyue announced that he would be in seclusion and would not come out. He himself stayed in his room and cultivated diligently. Finally, on the 3rd day, Ziyue let out a sigh of relief and a smile appeared on his face. I didn't think that just opening up the meridians of the Golden Bell cover would take me 3 days. This is also because my inner energy is dense and far surpasses that of a normal 3rd-rate expert. It is even comparable to some 2nd-rate experts. If I was still in the inner energy realm, it would be extremely difficult to open up all these meridians without at least half a month of hard work. As Ziyue thought about this, he couldn't help but sigh. Based on this calculation, when the Golden Bell cover said that a martial artist in the inner energy realm would need at least a month to master it, it wasn't an exaggeration at all. In his opinion, those who could master it in a month would definitely have great talent. Most people would need at least 2 to 3 months to master it. Since the circulation path of the Golden Bell cover is open, I can naturally start cultivating. However, right now my inner energy is completely empty. I still need to wait until my inner energy recovers. On the other hand, the sealing power on the storage bag is about to be destroyed. I can give it a try now. With his inner energy completely empty, Ziyue's body couldn't help but feel a sense of weakness. He controlled the Zifu creation art to circulate automatically. Threads of inner energy once again formed in his body. Only then did he reach into his clothes and take out a gray bag. A storage bag. During these 3 days, he naturally didn't forget to destroy the sealing power on the storage bag. Apart from cultivating the Golden Bell cover, all his thoughts were focused on this aspect. Now it was finally time to truly open the storage bag. In his heart, he couldn't help but feel nervous and expectant. His mental energy surged. The spiritual energy in his body was like a torrential river, surging into it. Shwa, shwa, shwa. The spiritual energy was like a surging wave. Layer after layer, it unceasingly rushed into the storage bag. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Time passed. Ziyue didn't seem to know exhaustion. The spiritual energy in his body was also rapidly depleting. 1. Finally, at a certain moment, the storage bag in Ziyue's hand emitted a violent trembling sound. Bang! Then, with a loud bang, it suddenly became clear. The storage bag had been opened. Ziyue was extremely excited. He impatiently probed his mental energy into the storage bag. This space isn't too big, but it's not small either. It's 2 square meters. It's enough to store a lot of things. Immediately, Ziyue sensed the size of the storage bag. He couldn't help but feel a burst of joy in his heart. In fact, not to mention 2 square meters, even if it was 1 square meter, or even smaller, he wouldn't feel dissatisfied in his heart. Because, whoosh, there was an uproar. Then, a large pile of things was taken out of the storage bag and piled up in the room. In an instant there was a stench. Vaguely, there was also a thick smell of smoke. Ziyue sniffed lightly and immediately felt a little dizzy. Almost without hesitation, he jumped out and opened the door and window. These, without a doubt, were originally the things in the storage bag. At this moment, he poured them all out. However, what he didn't expect was that, after 100 years, the various materials and elixirs in the storage bag had mixed and changed. They involuntarily combined into a kind of elixir poison. Even he was almost poisoned. After a while, he confirmed that the poison had dissipated. Only then did Ziyue step back into the room. First, he took out some robes, miscellaneous items, and a pile of obviously damaged elixirs and medicinal materials. He put them aside. Boom! A ball of flame turned into a stream of light and directly landed on these items. In the blink of an eye, they were burned into ashes. What a pity for the precious materials and elixirs! As Ziyue said this, his eyes flickered slightly. Soon, he calmed down. Taoist Kuan-Yun was at the 9th level of the Qi refinement stage, and was about to break through to the aperture awakening stage. In addition, it was said that 100 years ago, he had robbed a shop that had barrier-breaking pills. The items that were valued by him and placed in the storage bag were naturally very valuable. However, no matter how valuable they were, once they were contaminated with elixir poison, they would lose their effect. To him, there was no such thing as a pity. What's left are the items in the bag of holding that are still in good condition and have some value. As Ziyue thought to himself, his eyes suddenly focused. Soon, he took out a few pieces of hard cardboard from the pile of items. This hard cardboard is obviously of the same origin as the 2 pieces I obtained before. There are actually 5 pieces here. Including the 2 pieces I have, there are already 7 pieces. Ziyue took out a few pieces of hard cardboard. He couldn't help but look surprised. Even if he didn't have much hope for the possible treasure map recorded on the cardboard, as the number of pieces of cardboard increased, he couldn't help but daydream. Chapter 205. 7 pieces of golden paper combined together. I can already roughly see some things. But for now, it seems that what is carved on the golden paper is a simple map. Moreover, it is a map of Wujiang County and its surroundings, including Qinghe Town. There is no obvious path to the hidden treasure. Ziyue took out the 2 pieces of golden paper from his body and compared them. A trace of confusion appeared on his face. This golden paper was obviously not ordinary. Even with his current great strength, it was difficult to break it and deform it. Clearly, its hardness was astonishing. But such a miraculous item only recorded a map of a small place. No matter how he looked at it, it felt strange. Perhaps there is something hidden in this map. But because the golden paper is incomplete, I can't see it? Ziyue picked them up one by one and compared them. Looking at the edges, he estimated that there should be a total of 12 pieces of golden paper. 12 pieces of golden paper, but I have 7 in my hands. Although I know that these golden papers must have other secrets, they are obviously useless now. Perhaps there will be records in the sect? As he thought about it, Ziyue decided that he would definitely go to the sect's library in the future and look through it. Perhaps he would gain something. In addition to the 5 pieces of golden paper, there are 7 Dharma artifacts, 5 jade scroll eyes, 13 formation flags, and the rest are some relatively precious spiritual materials that can be used to refine Dharma artifacts. They should be worth a lot. Ziyue counted them one by one and could not help but feel excited. Although most of the 7 Dharma artifacts were low-grade and middle-grade Dharma artifacts, one of them was a top-grade Dharma artifact. Ziyue knew that the grade of a Dharma artifact was directly determined by the number of restrictions. A Dharma artifact with less than 27 restrictions would be a low-grade Dharma artifact. A Dharma artifact with 27 to 54 restrictions would be a middle-grade Dharma artifact. A Dharma artifact with 54 to 81 restrictions would be a high-grade Dharma artifact. As for a top-grade Dharma artifact, there was not much difference between it and a high-grade Dharma artifact. At least in terms of the number of restrictions, there was no difference between them. However, a top-grade Dharma artifact was formed because there were 72 ordinary restrictions in it. After some special method, they merged into one to form an Earth termination restriction. The Earthly Fiend restriction was the most important factor that differentiated high-grade magic artifacts from top-notch magic artifacts. At this moment, among the 7 magic artifacts, there was a magic artifact that looked like a mountain seal. Within it was an Earthly Fiend restriction. It was a top-grade magic artifact. Seal of mountains and rivers. So heavy. When Ziua saw the ancient characters on the seal, he knew that this was the name of this magical treasure. He couldn't help but pick up the seal of mountains and rivers. The heaviness in his hand caused his expression to change, and he grabbed it firmly. I didn't expect that this seal, which is only the size of a fist, would actually weigh 400 to 500 pounds. Fortunately, I have cultivated martial arts and am quite strong. Otherwise, it would be difficult for me to even lift it up. Ziua thought to himself as he stored the seal of mountains and rivers into his storage bag. Green Cloud Arts, 5 Directions Pure Origin Technique, Array Path True Explanation, Little Cloud and Rain Technique, Earth's Core Fire Technique. Immediately afterward, Ziua picked up the 5 jade slips one by one and invaded them with his spiritual force. In an instant, his eyes lit up and his heart was filled with excitement. The Green Cloud Arts is a cultivation technique similar to the Purple Chi Godly Visualization Technique. However, this technique is much more complete than the Purple Chi Godly Visualization Technique. It can be cultivated directly to the peak of the Aperture Awakening realm. Ziua's breathing quickened. He could only cultivate the Purple Chi Godly Visualization Technique to the 9th level of the Chi Refinement realm. However, this Green Cloud Arts could be cultivated directly to the peak of the Aperture Awakening realm. It was much more complete. However, it wasn't a wise decision to hastily switch to a cultivation method. Furthermore, this cultivation method was clearly weaker than the Purple Chi Visualization Technique. Thus, after a moment of impulse, he ultimately restrained himself. But soon, his heart trembled again. This 5 Directions Pure Origin Technique is a technique that can increase the chances of a cultivator at the 9th level of the Chi Refinement realm breaking through to the Aperture Awakening realm. According to the introduction of the technique, it can increase the chances of a cultivator breaking through by at least 20 to 30%. To a certain extent, the effect is no weaker than the effect of the bottleneck breaking pill. Or even stronger. It's just that. Ziua studied it carefully. His face quickly became silent. This technique was naturally an extremely precious cultivation technique. However, to truly cultivate it, one would need to rely on special treasures to open up the 5 apertures in the body. These 5 apertures were known as the 5 Directions Spiritual Apertures and belonged to the 5 elements. Once the apertures were opened, according to the cultivation method of the 5 Directions Pure Origin Technique, one could transform the spiritual energy in the cultivator's body and bring it closer to the Aperture Awakening realm. Naturally, the chances of breaking through would be greater. Even the cultivator's strength would increase accordingly. However, not to mention the difficulty of cultivating this technique, just the treasures of the 5 Directions Spiritual Apertures were not easy to obtain. However, although the cultivation method is difficult, the effects of this technique alone are enough to make countless people want to attach themselves to it. Even if the wandering cultivator Old Wu knew of the existence of this technique, he would definitely do everything in his power to obtain it. Ziua thought to himself as he solemnly put away the technique. Although he could not cultivate it now, he naturally wanted to give it a try if he had the chance in the future. As for the remaining truth of formations, little cloud and rain technique, and fire technique of the Earth's core, although they were all precious and Ziue attached great importance to them, they were no longer as shocking as before. Half an hour later, Ziue placed all the Dharma artifacts and treasures into his storage bag. Instantly, he felt a sense of lightness. With a thought, his mental energy surged into the storage bag. In an instant, his hand sank and a small sword of 7 feet appeared in his hand. Immediately after, with another thought, the small sword disappeared and reappeared in the storage bag. With the storage bag, it is indeed much more convenient. It is light and easy, and there is more of a sense of concealment. No one can predict what kind of Dharma artifact is hidden in my storage bag. It can naturally cause people to feel a sense of dread. Feeling satisfied, Ziue hung the storage pouch on his waist like a treasure. Then, he used his clothes to cover it up. After confirming that no one would be able to see through it, he felt slightly relieved. In the blink of an eye, another 10 days passed. During this period of time, Ziue did not leave the house or take a step out of it. In between, his cheap senior brother came looking for him once after hearing that he had been promoted and dragged him to treat him to a drink. Apart from that, no one else came. Ziue was naturally happy and relaxed as he stayed in his residence and cultivated silently. After 10 days, although he did not absorb and convert all his gains from the previous time into his own strength, he still managed to refine some spirit artifacts. However, he was finally able to refine a few magical artifacts and was able to easily use them. Among them, there was the small golden sword, the golden light sword, and the top-grade Dharma treasure, the mountain river seal, that he obtained from the storage bag. Although there was still a slight sluggishness when he used them, especially the mountain river seal. Because of its higher grade, the mental energy required to use it was greater and it was slower when he used it. However, there were no problems when he used it normally. He could already use it to unleash great power. Another thing worth mentioning was that after more than 10 days of cultivation, he had finally mastered the celestial sword technique recorded in the Purple Chi divine observation technique, the morning sun sword technique. Not only did this allow him to control the golden light sword more freely, but it also allowed him to perform some mysterious transformations. The power of the small sword had also increased by a large margin. However, even after he had mastered the golden bell shield, the effects were obvious. He could feel that his physical body was much stronger than before and the toughness of his skin had increased greatly. However, he still could not master it. On the contrary, his inner strength had become purer after continuous consumption and recovery. This was a pleasant surprise. After leaving the room, Ziue's figure quickly appeared in the living room. At this moment, there was already someone waiting in the living room. However, he was obviously a little anxious. Although Xiaodao had already brewed tea and placed snacks on the table, he was still not interested and was pacing back and forth in the living room. When he saw Ziue, his eyes lit up and he quickly went forward and said, "Junior brother, you must do me a favor. Don't be in such a hurry." "What is it?" Ziue waved his hand and said in a deep voice. "Junior brother, you have been cultivating in seclusion all this time and have not paid attention to the outside world. You must not know that the outside world has changed greatly. 3 escort agencies and 4 martial arts clubs, 1 escort agency and 2 martial arts clubs have been completely destroyed." Tang Zhanfei said quickly. 3 forces have been destroyed in such a short time? This should not be the result of their internal strife, right? However, what does this have to do with senior brother's request? Ziue raised his eyebrows and asked after a slight pause. He had long known that the Scorching Sun Gang and the 9 Seal sect were like fire and water. However, in order to prevent both sides from suffering losses, other forces would take advantage of them. Therefore, almost without prior agreement, they began to attack the other forces. Among them, the 3 escort agencies and 4 martial arts clubs were their target. However, due to the interference of the two top forces, the Scorching Sun Gang and the Nine Seal Sect, although the 3 escort agencies and 4 martial arts clubs had been in constant conflict, they had always maintained restraint and did not change much. He did not expect that after a period of not paying attention, it would develop to the point where 3 forces had been destroyed. Obviously, the Scorching Sun Gang and the Nine Seal Sect had interfered. However, what did this have to do with Tang Jianfei? The destruction of the 3 forces is naturally due to the interference of the Scorching Sun Gang and the Nine Seal Sect. Originally, the destruction of these forces had nothing to do with me. However, I have a friend who happens to be from the Wind and Thunder Escort Agency. Now that her life is in danger, I can't just watch her die. Therefore, I want to ask you to save her life. Tang Jianfei smiled bitterly and said. Chapter 206. The Wind and Thunder Escort Agency? If I remember correctly, they should have sided with the Nine Seals sect back then. If the Radiant Sun Gang had intervened, it wouldn't have been difficult for you to save an ordinary person, senior apprentice brother. Unless that person is very strong or a senior executive of the Wind and Thunder Escort Agency. Ziyue said calmly. She's not a senior executive of the Wind and Thunder Escort Agency. She's not very strong. She's just started cultivating internally. It's just that her identity is a little special. Tang Jianfei was a little hesitant. Senior brother, if you don't explain the situation clearly, I won't be able to help you. Ziyue looked at Tang Jianfei and said in a deep voice. Well, there's nothing to hide. She's my childhood sweetheart, but her current identity is one of the 7 young masters of Wujiang County, the wife of Wang Kai, the Little Thunderhand. Wang Kai was the foster son of Wang Donglai, the head of the Wind and Thunder Escort Agency. He died in the turmoil together with the Wind and Thunder Escort Agency. Although she's alive now, she's also imprisoned because of her identity as Wang Kai's widow. As he spoke, Tang Jianfei laughed at himself and said, to put it nicely, I'm just an inner disciple of the gang. In fact, who cares? I've tried my best, but I couldn't get anyone to bend the rules and rescue her. I had no choice but to turn to you, junior brother. With your current identity as a guardian of the Internal Affairs Hall, it's better than me, who has no position. If it doesn't work, according to the Scorching Sun Gang's ruthlessness to people who oppose us, it's very likely that we'll send her to a brothel. After all, we've known each other for a while, and I don't want to see that happen. As he spoke, a trace of determination appeared in his eyes. Ziyue was stunned and muttered in his heart, Tang Jianfei won't risk his life for this, will he? He didn't expect his cheap senior brother to be such an infatuated person. However, now that Tang Jianfei mentioned it, he remembered. The woman he mentioned should be the woman who stood beside Wang Kai in the Heavenly Fragrance Pavilion back then. She was indeed gentle and beautiful. No wonder he couldn't forget her. Where is she now? After a moment of silence, Ziyue asked. Together with a group of women and children, they were imprisoned in the Law Enforcement Hall's Tongxin courtyard. Tang Jianfei's eyes brightened. He quickly replied, Law Enforcement Hall? I don't have much say here. Ziyue sighed when he saw the anxious look on Tang Jianfei's face. After all, Tang Jianfei was his senior brother and had helped him before. He couldn't bear to see Tang Jianfei take the risk, so he continued, however, I know someone who has a wide circle of friends. Maybe he can talk to you. Who? Wang Peng, the guardian of the Water Affairs Hall. It's him. Tang Jianfei's eyes lit up. He knew that this person was the only son of Wang Lei, the head of the Water Affairs Hall. Although he was only a protector, he was strong enough to claim the position of the Hall Master. If he took over, there would be fewer obstacles. Feeling excited, Tang Jianfei hurriedly said, Then let's go quickly. With him here, it will be much safer. There's no hurry. If you want someone to help, you have to bring a gift. Ziyue said as he walked towards the backyard unhurriedly. I should call you protector by now, right? I didn't expect your status to take such a big leap in such a short time. What I didn't expect was that you would come to me. Have you thought it through and agreed to transfer the saber to me? Wang Peng looked at Ziyue in surprise and asked in amusement at the entrance of the Water Affairs Hall. The saber is a life-saving treasure. How can it be given away so casually? I came to you this time because there's something I need your help with. Ziyue shook his head and said, What if I say no? Although I can't transfer my saber to you, I have a saber that I think you will be interested in. What saber? The split-wave saber. What? Wang Peng's calm expression could no longer be maintained. He asked in shock. The split-wave saber that the Hall Master of the Battle Hall of the Nine Seals sect always carries? If there isn't another saber with this name, then it should be this one, Ziyue said in an indifferent tone. Tang Zhanfei had already received Ziyue's instructions and didn't dare to interrupt. He just held a saber case silently and didn't say a word. But at this moment, he quickly opened the saber case and revealed the saber inside. It was the saber that Yu Yong carried when he died at the hands of Ziyue. It was as white as silver and shone with a cold light. There were a few cracks on the edge of the saber, but it didn't change the fact that it was a famous saber. The Hall Master of the Battle Hall, Yu Yong, hasn't shown up for more than half a month. Even the people of the Nine Seal sect are tight-lipped about him. Many people are guessing if he's dead. Now that the split-wave saber has appeared, the news of his death must be true. Did you kill him? Seeing the split-wave saber, Wang Peng's pupils shrank and he looked at Ziyue in disbelief. Do you think I can kill a second-rate expert with my ability? Ziyue shrugged and said calmly. Of course not. Wang Peng shook his head violently and denied it. Then he said, But Brother Bai must be very capable to get his saber. I don't know what it is that even Brother Bai can't do, and you're looking for me? I have a friend who's locked up in the law enforcement hall. I need Guardian Wang to deal with him. Ziyue looked calmly at Tang Zhanfei and said, Deal. Wang Peng was relieved. He quickly reached out and touched the split-wave saber. 3,000 taels of silver. Just send it to my residence when the time comes. Ziyue grinned and looked at Wang Peng. He said, Guardian Wang, you don't think you can get a famous saber just by saving a person, do you? Why would I? Even if Guardian Bai is willing, I can't take advantage of you. Wang Peng smiled bitterly, but he still held the split-wave saber in his hand and played with it. Wang Peng did not have any other hobbies in his life, but he loved collecting all kinds of weapons. Although he had a lot of collections of famous sabers like the split-wave saber, he did not have one. Now that he could get it, he was willing to spend 5,000 taels of silver, even if it was a little painful and he had to do some favors. Soon, the three of them walked toward the Law Enforcement Hall's United Heart courtyard. Although the Law Enforcement Hall is in charge of the sect's discipline, it has long been rotten. Ordinary people might try to cover up and maintain their dignity. But as long as you find the right person, it's not difficult to get them to give you a way out. Wang Peng shook his head and said as they walked. Ziyue was silent. He had always had some conflicts with the Law Enforcement Hall in the sect. Naturally, he knew that there was no one in the Law Enforcement Hall who was fair and impartial. Instead, there were many who killed people for personal gain. Then why did no one care when I came forward and said that I was willing to pay 500 taels of silver? Tang Zhanfei quickly asked when he heard that. 500 taels of silver was all he had. If it were not for the fact that he was at his wit's end, he would not have come to Ziyue. First, your friend's identity is different. Wang Kai was one of the 7 young masters of Wujiang County. As his widow, your friend would naturally be the focus of attention. Another possibility was that she might be involved in other matters. Or there might be someone in the Law Enforcement Hall who wants to squeeze more benefits out of her. That's why they rejected your request. The Wind Thunder Escort Agency is a big force, and there's definitely a lot of money to be gained. It's not impossible that someone wants to take advantage of your friend. Moreover, if your friend is beautiful, there are few righteous people in the scorching sun gang. Wang Peng grinned and said with emotion, "Then wouldn't you be in danger?" Tang Jianfei was anxious, and he quickened his pace. "Judging from Guardian Wang's expression, you're very confident?" Ziyue followed closely behind Tang Jianfei and asked calmly. "I dare not say I'm very confident, but Guardian Zhuang of the Law Enforcement Hall is a close friend of mine. Many disciples in the Law Enforcement Hall will also be willing to give me some face. If Brother Tang's friend is not involved in some major incident or has provoked the attention of the Law Enforcement Hall's hall master, there won't be too big of a problem." Wang Peng smiled confidently and followed behind the two with light footsteps. The same Heart Courtyard was not remote, but because it belonged to the Law Enforcement Hall, very few people set foot there. Soon, Ziyue and the other two stepped into the Law Enforcement Hall's territory and quickly approached the same Heart Courtyard. Then, they immediately attracted the attention of the two Law Enforcement Hall disciples guarding the door. One of them seemed to recognize Tang Jianfei. He snorted and said, "It's you again? I've told you that outsiders are not allowed to come near. Do you really think I'm talking nonsense? I'm Guardian Wang Peng of the Water Affairs Hall, and beside me is the new Guardian Ziyue of the Internal Affairs Hall. Because of a misunderstanding, we have a friend who is locked up in the same Heart Courtyard, so we would like to ask the two of you to make an exception and let us take our friend out. By the way, I've always been on good terms with your Guardian Zhuang. If he's here, please ask him to come out. I think Elder Zhuang will definitely agree to help me with a small favor." Wang Peng stepped forward and said, "Guardian Wang, Guardian Bai?" That person was shocked. The status of a guardian was definitely not low. They were just ordinary law enforcement disciples, and were not even comparable to the steward, let alone a guardian. Moreover, he also recognized Wang Peng's identity. He was the only son of the Water Affairs Hall Master, and he was very powerful and had once been an influential figure in the sect. He naturally did not dare to be negligent when such a figure personally came out. He quickly said, "May I know who Guardian Wang's friend is? As long as it's not someone important, we can also make the decision to let him out." The other person at the side saw Tang Jianfei standing beside Ziyue and Wang Peng. His heart skipped a beat, and he could not help but show a trace of panic on his face. Immediately, he began to feel anxious. "Zhao Ye, our friend's name is Zhao Ye," Wang Peng said. Immediately, the expressions of the two Law Enforcement Hall disciples who were guarding the door changed. Chapter 207. Tang Jianfei, who had been paying attention to the two of them, became anxious after hearing Wang Peng's explanation. He dashed out like a bolt of lightning. Boom! With a loud bang, the door of the United Heart Courtyard collapsed. Tang Jianfei paused for a moment and then dashed inside. "What are you doing?" The two disciples guarding the door shouted and chased after Tang Jianfei. Ziyue and Wang Peng did not expect Tang Jianfei to be so impulsive. Ziyue was afraid that Tang Jianfei would be at a disadvantage, so he said, "Let's go." Soon, they dashed into the courtyard through the door and caught up with the disciples of the Law Enforcement Hall. However, Tang Jianfei had disappeared around the corner. They followed him quickly. As soon as they turned the corner, they saw a disciple of the Law Enforcement Hall walking out of a room in a panic. Looking in the direction of the room, a figure with half of her snow-white skin was lying motionlessly on the bed. Their hearts sank. Soon, they were stunned because they did not see Tang Jianfei. They looked at the other rooms and hesitated. Boom! A loud sound like a house collapsing was heard. Even the rubble kept rolling down from the roof. "Who are you? Do you want to die?" An angry voice was heard. "Who am I? I'm the one who will kill you." Tang Jianfei could not suppress his anger. His sword hummed and turned into a bolt of lightning. "You're courting death. That person roared. He picked up the long saber beside him and started to fight with Tang Jianfei. Boom! Suddenly, a wall was knocked open. A large amount of dust and rubble fell. 2 figures dashed out of the room. Stop! Wang Peng quickly turned into an eagle and inserted himself into the center of the fight. He raised his long saber and separated the 2 of them. Soon after, another 5 to 6 figures quickly gathered from all over the United Heart Pavilion. Are you okay? Ziyue approached Tang Jianfei and asked in a low voice. I'm fine. Junior brother, I'm sorry to have caused you trouble. Tang Jianfei replied in a low voice and rushed into the room that had almost collapsed. He helped a woman out of the room. Her body was covered with whip marks and her hands were bloody. She did not look like she had been violated, but she had suffered a lot. Guardian Wang, what do you mean by this? Are you trying to rob the execution ground? The disciple of the law enforcement hall who was stopped said in an unfriendly tone with a gloomy face. Manager Dai, this matter is our fault. After this matter, I will definitely go to the Heavenly Fragrance Pavilion and treat them to a table of good wine and dishes as compensation. Wang Peng also looked at Tang Jianfei with an unhappy face. Although he was willing to help, he didn't want to get into such trouble. Protector Wang, you're too polite. There's no need to apologize. Of course you. Of you, heavens of you. I suspect that he might be in cahoots with the Wind and Thunder Escort to harm our Radiant Sun faction. Dai Chang glanced at Wang Peng with a fake smile, and then looked at Tang Jianfei fiercely. Although he could not afford to offend Guardian Wang, this was the law enforcement hall's place. He was in the right. Naturally, he was not afraid. What do you mean? Wang Peng took a step forward and frowned at him. Dai Chang sneered and said, What do I mean? I'd like to ask you. What do you mean? What do you think the law enforcement hall is? If you provoke me, none of you will be able to leave today. You're talking big. Ziyue was slightly angry and glanced at him. Steward Dai, don't talk nonsense. I will definitely take Brother Tang away. And this woman, I think you just want to extort some money from her. Tell me, and I won't make things difficult for you. Wang Peng frowned again and looked at Tang Jianfei. It was a simple matter, but Tang Jianfei made it complicated. Although Wang Peng had a high status and strength, he could not be too rude to the disciples of the gang. Moreover, Steward Dai had a strong background despite his low strength. His sister was the 7th aunt of the inner palace. Wang Peng did not want to offend him too much. Therefore, he could only soften his tone. He planned to give up some money to ensure that he could leave unscathed. Of course, he would not pay for it. He did not care if it was Tang Jianfei or Ziyue. Since Guardian Wang is so straightforward, I can't not give you face. How about this? 1,000 taels of silver each, and I'll pretend that nothing happened. Dai Chang did not care about Ziyue's words. He thought that Ziyue was just Wang Peng's subordinate. He shrugged and smiled at Wang Peng. 1,000 taels of silver? Tang Jianfei glared at Dai Chang. He could not hold back his anger. 1,000 taels of silver was enough for a family of 5 to live comfortably for 20 to 30 years. It was enough for them to build a large house in Wujiang County. It was even enough to train an ordinary young man to become an internal refinement expert. He did not have such money. Even if he did, he would not be willing to pay. Especially when he saw Zhao Yer, who had obviously suffered a lot. The anger in his heart surged violently again. We must take her away. We don't have any money. If this is an execution ground, then we're really going to be robbed. Ziyue, who was already dissatisfied, finally opened his mouth. His tone was indifferent, but there was an unquestionable domineering aura. Hey, who do you think you are? How dare you talk so big? I'd like to see how you are going to take her away. Dai Chang's face darkened. He looked at Ziyue mockingly. He was a little afraid of Wang Peng, but who was Ziyue? He did not know him, and he did not want to know him. "Let's go," Ziua shouted and turned to leave. "I'd like to see who dares to leave." Dai Chang was stunned. He quickly rushed forward. However, what he faced was an extremely fast fist. Boom! Dai Chang's body flew backward at a speed faster than when he rushed out. He flew for a distance of 30 to 40 feet before he fell and landed on the roof of the broken house. Voila! Countless rubble quickly rolled down as he rolled in, almost burying him under the rubble. Ziua slowly retracted his fist. He glanced at the faces of the others and said, "I'm taking her away. Does anyone have anything to say?" The scene was silent. The few disciples of the law enforcement hall looked at each other. They were also shocked. None of them had the confidence to take that punch. In fact, Steward Dai was the strongest among them. If he could not take the punch, they would not be able to take it. Even Wang Peng, who had reached the peak of the internal energy state, looked at Ziua in shock. Even he had to pay attention to the power of that punch. If it wasn't for the fact that he couldn't feel the aura of inner strength from this punch, he would have suspected that Ziua had already cultivated inner strength and reached the inner strength realm. "Let's go." Seeing that the others did not speak, Ziua said indifferently. Tang Zhanfei's eyes widened. He came back to his senses and quickly pulled the girl beside him to follow behind him. Ziua was now very strong. Not to mention the ordinary sect members, even the hall masters and elders in the sect could not defeat him. Naturally, he had a lot of confidence. How could he take a group of people who had not even cultivated internal energy seriously? He originally wanted to follow the rules of the sect and make a trip there. That was why he invited Wang Peng over. He planned to use his face to help his cheap senior brother smoothly. It could be considered as repaying him for being generous and not taking his contribution points for reporting the assassins last time. After all, if it were not for this incident, he would not have been able to get the protective technique of the Golden Bell shield from the sect leader. He did not expect that the other party would dare to distort the truth in front of him and push his luck. It was no wonder that he lost his temper. The strong could not be humiliated. Although he had hidden his strength, it did not mean that he was willing to endure it. At this point, even if he had exposed his true strength, so what? The current him was no longer the same as before. When the four of them left the United Heart courtyard, Wang Peng could not hide his shock and asked, "How is your strength now?" "I feel that even an ordinary martial artist at the peak of the internal energy state would not be able to take that punch." Ziua thought about it. Previously, he had publicly announced in front of the sect leader that he was at the internal energy state. Now that he had been in seclusion for a while, he could naturally raise his strength. The late stage of the internal energy state was a more suitable strength. He said, "I just broke through to the internal energy state. The reason why I was able to achieve such an effect was that, first, his strength was relatively weak. Second, it was because I was born with great strength. Coupled with the state of the fist technique, I practiced it well. Well, in the final analysis, it was because he was too weak." Ziua shook his head and said. Tang Zhanfei's expression suddenly became interesting. He did not feel that Dai Chang was weak at all. If Wang Peng had not made a move just now, he might have suffered a little. There was only one reason for this, and that was Ziua's strength was a little too strong. Thinking of his junior brother's growth speed, he could not help but feel some respect in his heart. Brother Bai's strength is already very strong. Perhaps in 1 or 2 years, he will be able to cultivate internal energy. In terms of talent, he is probably stronger than the white-robed swordsman Chen Qingyun. It is really impressive. Wang Peng's face was still full of admiration. The way he looked at Ziua was also very different. If it was said that he had helped before just to make a deal in exchange for Ziua's split-wave saber, then at this moment, he wanted to make friends with him. His tone became serious and he reminded him, however, although this matter is satisfying, it will inevitably offend the law enforcement hall. Besides, behind Dai Chang is Elder Gong, who has been in charge of the law enforcement hall for almost 20 years. Whether it is for public or private reasons, someone will definitely come to make trouble for Brother Bai. I feel that Brother Bai should make preparations as soon as possible. Chapter 208. Elder Gong? Yes, I know. Ziyue narrowed his eyes and said softly. Wang Peng's heart skipped a beat. He thought of the 2 disciples of the law enforcement hall who died in the last mission, and his suspicions grew. Just as he was about to speak, a bright light shot into the sky from afar, and then exploded. A dazzling firework instantly lit up the sky. Even in broad daylight, it was very conspicuous. Oh no, that's a warning firework from the sect. Something must have happened. Wang Peng's expression changed, and then he quickly looked at Ziyue and Tang Zhanfei, saying, Brother Bai, something big must have happened to trigger the warning firework from the sect. Looking at the direction of the firework, it seems to be the Wu River dock area, which happens to be under the jurisdiction of the Water Affairs Hall. I have to go now, as it's my duty. Let's have a drink together next time. How about that? Go and be careful. Ziyue nodded and did not ask him to stay. Wang Peng did not hesitate. He nodded at Ziyue and Tang Zhanfei, and then he quickly rushed to the Water Affairs Hall and the dock of Wu River County. Thank you, Protector Bai. If it weren't for Protector Bai and that Protector Wang, I probably wouldn't have been able to escape from the sea of suffering. If it were just me, I would have died. But in my stomach there is still a life. Zhao Ye's eyes were filled with tears. She touched her belly and said softly. Ziyue's expression changed, and he could not help but look at his cheap senior brother Tang Zhanfei. Zhao Ye was pregnant. Obviously, it could not be his cheap senior brother Tang Zhanfei's child. It could very well be the child of Wang Kai, the little thunderhand who had died. If that was the case, his cheap senior brother, junior brother, you don't have to suspect anything. I've known about this for a long time. As long as I can see her safe and happy, I'll be at ease. Pain flashed in Tang Zhanfei's eyes and he said, Junior brother, we have to go too. It's an eventful time now. The battle between the Nine Seals sect and the Scorching Sun gang could break out at any time. This time, the warning fireworks were clearly a sign of things to come. Therefore, I plan to leave with Ye as soon as possible and settle her down first. In addition, if the law enforcement hall insists on finding trouble with junior brother, they can push all the blame to me. After all, this matter started because of me. I will definitely not let junior brother be implicated. Take care of yourself. Ziyue didn't comment, but his eyes looked in the direction Wang Peng left, and his brows furrowed slightly. Very few people appeared on the originally bustling street. The doors of all the shops were tightly shut. Even the occasional passers-by walked quickly, not daring to stay on the streets for too long. Ziyue walked on the street with a calm expression. His pace was neither fast nor slow. His body seemed to be relaxed, and his hands were hanging down naturally. He seemed to be very relaxed. However, under such circumstances, he was able to react quickly and pull out his saber to deal with any unforeseen circumstances. Although it looked like a flaw, it was actually a way to counterattack. In terms of martial arts, Ziyue had already reached an extremely profound state. Guardian Bai, another 300 meters and we will reach the place where the Wu brothers died. That place is within the Nine Seal sect's territory. Are we really going to go there? Who doesn't know that Wujiang County has been in chaos recently? Countless people die every day. Do you think the number of deaths in the sect is small? Needless to say, the Wu brothers' deaths must have been caused by the Nine Seal sect. The sect sent us to investigate them to make things difficult for us. Behind Ziyue were two young men who were swearing. They walked behind Ziyue, but they didn't feel safe at all. They looked around nervously, as if they would be in trouble at any time. These two were the subordinates assigned to him by the sect, Pei Tuzi and Wu Ma. Just follow me. Ziyue's tone was very calm. Walking on the quiet street, his body became more relaxed. It had been 3 days since the last time the warning fireworks had been set off in the gang. 3 days ago, the warning firework was because the Scorching Sun Gang's Wujiang Wharf had been attacked by water bandits again. Moreover, the experts from the Nine Seals sect had accompanied the water bandit. However, this time, the sect seemed to have expected it. The leader of the Scorching Sun Gang had arrived in time and killed all the water bandits. Following that, various assassination methods against the Scorching Sun Gang were launched. Sneak attacks, poisoning, digging holes, ambushes, it was impossible to guard against them. Within a short period of time, the Scorching Sun Gang had suffered heavy losses. Since then, the war between the Scorching Sun Gang and the Nine Seal sect had broken out. This time, the sect assigned Ziyue the task of investigating the Wu brothers' death. It seemed to be difficult, but there were no requirements. He had to complete the task. If he wanted to, he only needed to take a stroll outside. If nothing could be found, he would be able to complete the task. The reason why he came close was because he lacked spiritual power. The war between the Scorching Sun Gang and the Nine Seal sect was more frequent in places like this. Naturally, he wanted to use this opportunity to obtain more spiritual power. Just as Pei Tuzi and Wu Ma were cursing, 2 old beggars in rags with messy hair walked over shakily from a corner. From time to time, they would pick up the rotten vegetables on the ground and carefully place them in the broken bowls in their hand. "What's the smell? Beggars, get away from us!" As the beggars approached, a strong stench immediately made the 2 men cover their noses and mouths, as if they could not bear it. "Yes, yes, sir." The 2 beggars nodded repeatedly. When they moved away shakily, they suddenly flipped their hands and a dagger appeared in their hands. Then, like flickering light and passing shadows, the 2 men quickly rushed out. Carrying a strong stench, the dagger shone with a cold light. Under the sunlight, it was incomparably bright. Ah! The 2 men were so shocked that they could not react. They could only watch as the dagger quickly pierced their heads. Poof! Poof! 2 heads flew into the sky. Soon, there were 2 more stinking corpses on the ground. "Thank you, Guardian Bai, for saving us." Pei Tuzi and Wu Ma were shocked and said with lingering fear, "Be careful. The Nine Seal sect has recently issued a huge reward. Anyone who obtains the Scorching Sun Gang's disciple nameplate will be rewarded with silver. 10 taels for an outer disciple, 50 taels for an inner disciple, 150 for a steward, and 500 for a guardian. If you don't want to become someone else's reward, you'd better be careful." Ziyue reminded them in a low voice. With a slight turn of his long saber, it turned into a ray of saber light and disappeared into the scabbard. Perhaps they knew that their overall strength was far inferior to the Scorching Sun Gang. Hence, the Nine Seal sect was willing to do anything and was willing to give up huge amounts of wealth. This was the real reason why the Scorching Sun Gang had suffered so many casualties recently. Most of them did not die at the hands of the Nine Seal sect. Instead, it was possible that they were killed by some low-level people in Wujiang County. Yes. The 2 of them nodded repeatedly and immediately became even more vigilant. Anyone who approached them would attract their attention. After turning the corner, they soon officially stepped into the territory of the Nine Seal sect. Even Ziyue was more vigilant now. Suddenly, a group of people walked out from a street not far away. When they saw them, they were shocked but soon relaxed. They said loudly, "Which hall are you from?" "Internal Affairs Hall." Ziyue narrowed his eyes and seemed to relax a lot. "So it's the brothers from Internal Affairs Hall. I didn't expect that even Internal Affairs Hall has started to send out such missions. However, the consecutive battles are really satisfying. Just today, 3 disciples of the Nine Seal sect have died at my hand. Haha, how satisfying." The leader laughed loudly, as if he was very satisfied with the results of his battle. "Big brother, you're really strong. I wonder which hall you're from? Pei Tuzi was very envious when he heard this and answered loudly. Haha, I'm Gao Yang from the Mining Administration Hall. Those beside me are my colleagues from the Mining Administration Hall. As the man spoke, he came closer. It's senior brother Gao Yang from the Mining Administration Hall. I've seen him once when I was doing some paperwork in the Internal Affairs Hall. I think he was with Guardian Zhuang back then. Wu Ma explained to Ziyue first. Then Yufeng finally relaxed and said happily, when it comes to killing enemies, Master Gao Yang is really good. However, our Guardian Bai is not weak either. Just now, on the way, we happened to meet two assassins who disguised themselves as beggars. They were killed by our Guardian in one stroke. Haha, he's not weaker than senior brother Gao Yang. Is that so? I've heard of the name of the domineering swordsman Zhu. I've been regretting that I couldn't make friends with you. Now that I've met you, you're really a young hero. Gao Yang flattered as his eyes kept sizing up Ziyue. He came closer and closer until the distance between them was only about 20 meters. Stop. Suddenly, Ziyue's cold voice sounded. Guardian Bai? Dog Pei and Wu Ma were puzzled. Senior brother, your clothes seem a little too small. And that one, isn't he a little too loose? Bai Ziyue looked behind Gao Yang with a faint smile on his face. There was a burly man who was obviously more muscular than the average person. Beside the burly man was a short and small man. Gao Yang and the others looked at each other. Brothers, he's exposed. Kill. The burly man heard this and his eyes, which were as big as copper bells, widened. His stooped body suddenly straightened up. Sizzle. Clear sounds of clothes tearing could be heard. Then, he paused for a moment and quickly charged toward Bai Ziyue. Kill! Gao Yang and the other three people beside him pulled out all kinds of weapons. They were like tigers released from their cages as they rushed toward Su Ping. Traitor, how dare you lie to me? Dog Pei's face changed and he was instantly enraged. He quickly raised his long saber and slashed with all his might. Chapter 209. Oh no, the late internal refinement realm. Just as Puppy Pei's saber was about to strike, his expression changed drastically. With a groan, he quickly retreated. Gao Yang was already at the late internal refinement realm, while he was only at the middle internal refinement realm. There was a huge difference between their strength. Die! A long sword stabbed out diagonally, as fast as lightning, towards Puppy Pei's eyes. The cold sword radiance was extremely fast. Without a sound, a long black saber slashed at the long sword. Clang! The long sword was cut in half without any resistance. The cut was as smooth as a mirror. The attacker only felt his hand lighten. Then, he saw a pitch-black saber radiance, carrying with it a boundless sense of darkness and stillness, slashing towards him. So fast! Just as this thought flashed through his mind, the saber radiance was already in front of him. Puff! The moment his head was separated from his head, a blank thought flashed through his mind. I'm dead. It was Ziyue who had made his move. Bai Ziyue did not pay any attention to the shocked and grateful Puppy Pei as he slashed out with his saber. He stomped on the ground. Boom! Under the huge impact, the stone pavement instantly crumbled into powder. At the same time, Ziyue's figure disappeared from where he stood and appeared in front of Gao Yang. Gao Yang's expression changed drastically. His long saber quickly rolled up. As it rippled, the air seemed to vibrate, and there was an annoying sound like a mosquito buzzing in one's ear. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The saber radiance rolled up like a graceful swan. When it struck, it was like a rolling river, sweeping down from the high cliff. In the vast expanse of whiteness, there was a strong killing intent. 36 Styles Saber Technique. Good saber technique. Unfortunately, it's flashy but impractical. Bai Ziyue exclaimed softly. He did not pay any attention to the long sabers that seemed to be dancing in the air, creating a vast expanse of whiteness. Only one saber, and only one saber, struck down. Tyrant saber technique. Boom. No matter what kind of saber technique, no matter how exquisite the technique, in the face of absolute power, it could only be reduced to ashes. Gao Yang's long saber spun backward, and the destructive power caused his body to be flung away. His body moved downward, leaving an opening. There was almost no obstruction, and the black long saber slashed through. Gao Yang opened his mouth, but there was a long and narrow line of blood that extended from his face, and then suddenly exploded. Puff! His body instantly split apart from the top of his head. Good. That's how it should be for traitors. In Pei Tun's heart, there was a carefree feeling. It was as if a bucket of cold water had been poured on his face on a hot summer day. That comfortable feeling spread from his face to the bottom of his spine. It was a refreshing feeling that he had never felt before. He hated traitors the most, not to mention the fact that the other party had brazenly appeared in front of him, using the identity of a fellow disciple to make a move on him. Kill! Ziyue attacked in an instant. Every step, one saber, one person. His actions of killing two people in an instant made Wu Ma somewhat agitated. Her long saber flashed, and she snatched at the thin and short martial artist. "How dare you!" the tall and burly man shouted, and his voice was like a thunderclap. His thick arms held a heavy hammer, and he instantly hammered it out. Flowing cloud hammer technique. The heavy hammer rolled, and although it was not fast, it carried a force that could break iron and stone. Clang! The black god's saber collided with it, and the heavy hammer bounced back and flew backward. A long and deep saber mark was left on the heavy hammer. What a strong force, what a sharp saber! The burly man's face suddenly changed, and a trace of fear flashed in his eyes. He did not expect that his innate strength, coupled with the fact that he had cultivated his martial arts to the peak of the internal refinement realm, and the strength of his body, coupled with a 300 kilograms heavy hammer, would be terrifying. He was actually suppressed by his opponent's saber. The force in his body was like a drop of water in the sea, and it did not cause the slightest ripple. Instead, the force in his opponent's long saber was like a torrential river, and it directly flowed into his body through the war hammer, causing his blood to churn. When he saw the saber mark on his war hammer, his pupils contracted violently. Could this long saber be a treasured saber that could cut iron like mud? "Take another strike from my hammer!" the burly man roared, and a courageous and powerful aura suddenly surged from his body. It was as if he would either succeed or die trying. However, when his hammer fell, and his aura was at its peak, he instantly let go, and then without hesitation, he turned and fled. He fled. Even Ziyue was surprised. This action did not match his burly and majestic body, and his aura that could move mountains and rivers. In fact, only the burly man himself knew how terrifying Ziyue was. Not to mention his terrifying strength, just his opponent's treasured saber, which could cut iron like mud, made him terrified. He knew very well that if this continued, the moment his opponent's saber broke his heavy hammer would be the moment of his death. Judging from the deep saber mark on the warhammer, it would only take 2 or 3 strikes to break it. Therefore, he fled. Resolute and decisive, he pulled out his saber and fled without hesitation. Puff! Ziyue slashed with his saber, following the previous saber mark. The incomparably thick war hammer was immediately broken into 2 halves, and flew to both sides. However, he did not pay any attention to the burly man who was about to escape. Instead, he put away his saber, stood still, and smiled. Sensing that Ziyue did not chase after him, the burly man could not help but feel a little puzzled. He turned his head and happened to see a mysterious smile at the corner of his mouth. Smile? Why smile? Just as this thought appeared in his mind, he turned around and immediately felt his vision go dark. Then, his heart went cold, and an immense pain filled his thoughts. "Guardian Wang, how have you been?" Ziyue greeted him. The one who suddenly appeared and killed the burly man was Guardian Wang Peng, whom he had not seen for a few days. I've felt Brother Bai's strength before, and it was extraordinary. Seeing you today, I didn't expect that even Tian Buer, the flowing cloud warhammer of the Nine Seals sect, who had reached the peak of internal refining, was no match for you. He even lost the courage to fight you and wanted to abandon his war hammer and flee. I really admire you. Wang Peng pulled out his long saber and looked at Ziyue. The surprise in his eyes was even greater than the last time. Last time, although Ziyue had sent Daichang, who was at the late stage of internal refining, flying with one punch, his opponent was not strong and had no reputation. Therefore, although he was surprised, he was not too surprised. But Tian Buer, the flowing cloud warhammer, was different. Not only was he a warrior at the peak of internal refining, but he had also made a name for himself in Jianghu. Among those at the peak of internal refining, he was considered an expert. However, even such an expert could only run away from Bai Ziyue. His strength had truly shocked him. Compared to Protector Wang, it's nothing. Ziyue smiled humbly and looked to the side. Pei Tundog and Wu Ma were originally in danger, but with the help of Wang Peng's men, they quickly killed the remaining 2 disciples of the Nine Seals sect. Wu Ma was the only one who suffered a cut on her hand due to an accident, but the injury was not serious. However, compared to Brother Bai's strength, the saber in your hand really makes me envious. I was wondering why Brother Bai was unwilling to transfer the saber to me. It turns out that it's a treasured saber that can cut through iron like mud. It seems that the one who gained the most from the destruction of the Nine Seals weapon workshop is still Brother Bai. As he spoke, Wang Peng's eyes revealed a hint of passion. But soon, the passion in his eyes disappeared, and he regained his composure. I was just lucky. Ziyue shrugged and casually waved the saber. The long saber was quickly inserted into the scabbard at his waist. The pitch-black saber disappeared. Oh yes, I remember that Brother Bai is now the guardian of the Internal Affairs Hall. Why did you appear at the battlefield? If we didn't hear the commotion here, we would have missed it. Wang Peng smiled and said, Coincidentally, I have a task that requires me to stay here. But looking at the chaotic scene now, it seems that there won't be much to gain. Ziyue explained casually and said helplessly, That's great. Brother Bai can work with me. I'm willing to give you 30% of the gains. What do you think? Wang Peng couldn't help but extend the invitation. It seems that Guardian Wang has found a good opportunity to make a fortune? Ziyue raised his eyebrows in surprise and said, This street was originally managed by Elder Guo Yun of the Nine Seals sect. More than 80% of the entire street belongs to the Nine Seals sect. Half of this 80% belongs to Elder Guo Yun. In the early days, he had the elegant name of Guobanji. I've received news that Elder Guo Yun of the Nine Seals sect was severely injured in the battle with Elder Nye Yunhao of our sect yesterday. Now, there's a high chance that he has retaken the mountain gate of the Nine Seals sect. There must be a lot of treasures in Guo Yun's residence. There must be a lot of rare martial arts manuals as well. Also, it's worth mentioning that most of the elders and hall masters of our sect have been dispatched today. The sect master has requested that they eliminate all the forces of the Nine Seals sect in Wujiang County in the shortest time possible. With the strength of our sect in Wujiang County, this is a sure thing. Therefore, we probably won't encounter any experts that are difficult to deal with. Naturally, we can't let go of the wealth of the Guo family. Wang Peng looked at Ziyue with a smile and said, There was one thing that he didn't say. Although the Guo family might not have a third-rate expert like Elder Guo Yun, there was no lack of inner energy cultivators among his subordinate. As far as he knew, there were as many as 3. If Ziyue, who was only at the internal refinement level, but whose combat strength was not much weaker than an inner energy cultivator, was there to assist him, the pressure on him would be greatly reduced. Chapter 210 Since Enforcer Wang thinks so highly of me, I'm naturally willing to help. Ziyue thought for a moment and nodded in agreement. He didn't care much about wealth, but he wasn't willing to let go of secret martial arts manuals. Not to mention, with Wang Peng, their speed in killing enemies would be much faster. Naturally, his spiritual power would increase as well. Thinking of spiritual power, he couldn't help but glance at his status panel. Spiritual power, 37844. A faint trace of disappointment flashed through the depths of his eyes. Although the two beggars from before were fierce, they were only at the outer refinement realm. The amount of spiritual power they provided wasn't high. The two of them added up to less than 500. The 5 beggars that they just defeated were all at the inner refinement realm. Among them, Tianbu Air was at the peak of the inner refinement realm. However, the 5 of them only increased his spiritual power by about 8,000. It was far from enough for his needs. However, although 30,000 spiritual power can't increase my immortal techniques by another level, it can help me break through the bottleneck of the martial path and reach the level of a second-rate expert. A faint trace of joy flashed through Ziyue's eyes. A third-rate expert cultivated the 12 standard meridians. When all 12 meridians were unblocked, it meant that the martial artist's strength had reached the peak of the third-rate expert. As for a second-rate expert, they cultivated the 8 extraordinary meridians. When one of the 8 extraordinary meridians was unblocked, it meant that the martial artist's strength had reached the level of a second-rate expert. 30,000 spiritual power was enough for him to completely unblock the first extraordinary meridian. With his heart set, Ziyue had a faint trace of anticipation for the upcoming trip to the Guo residence. Soon, Ziyue's group and Wang Peng's group of 5 were on the road again. Through a simple introduction, Ziyue understood that among the 8 of them, other than Wang Peng who had reached the late stage of the inner refinement realm, there was another person who had just entered the inner refinement realm. His name was Dong Wenwu. As for the others, they were all at the inner refinement realm. Adding on his external appearance, he was at the inner refinement realm. His combat strength was at the peak of the inner refinement realm. With his treasured saber, he could fight against inner refinement realm cultivators. Not to mention, Ziyue's true combat strength was even more terrifying. Along the way, other than the 2 disciples of the 9 Seals sect who did not manage to escape in time and were conveniently killed by them, they did not encounter any obstacles and arrived near the Guo mansion. Don't you feel that it's too quiet around here? Suddenly, Ziyue stopped in his tracks. His eyes quickly swept across the houses on both sides as he spoke. Quiet. Wang Peng was an extremely alert person. The moment Ziyue brought it up, his gaze froze. Indeed. Then, a long saber slashed into the wooden house at the side like a waterfall. Boom. The door of the wooden house collapsed, and a man hiding behind the door was killed before he could even scream. Kill! Boom. 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 Following this, several figures suddenly dashed out from the wooden huts and the roofs of the buildings. These figures all had surging qi and blood. Clearly, they were not weak. All in all, there were more than 20 of them. Among them, there were 3 who had strong auras and were clearly different from the average inner energy expert. Some of them were even holding fishing nets and bags of lime powder in their hand. Even crossbows and arrows that were controlled by the army were clearly held in their hand. Clearly, these were all tactics used during a surprise attack. However, because Ziyue had seen through their ambush, their preparations were in vain. So many people? Wang Peng was shocked. He glanced at Ziyue with lingering fear. If he had not noticed it in advance, they would have been in trouble if they had fallen into an ambush. With so many layers of fishing nets, even if he wanted to break free, it would take a lot of effort. In addition, the lime powder would confuse his eyes and the arrows would shoot out. Just thinking about it made his heart tremble. However, what made him feel strange was that even he, an inner energy expert at the later stage, did not notice anything amiss. Ziyue's ability was lower than his, so how did he notice it? However, this was not the time to ask questions. His body moved and he instantly charged forward. At the same time, Ziyue, Dong Wenwu and the others also attacked at the first moment, each of them releasing their own attacks. With the 8 of them working together, even though their numbers were far less than those of the Nine Seals sect, they were able to gain the upper hand in a short period of time due to the fact that their opponents were spread out. One of the inner refinement intermediate stage warriors saw that Ziyue's face was slightly immature and thought that he was the weakest among them, so he slashed out with his sword. Ziyue flipped his hand and a pitch-black sword light flashed out quickly. Clang! The opponent's long sword broke abruptly. The black long sword did not lose its momentum and directly stood on his head, cutting off half of his head. At the same time, Ziyue's other hand flashed out like a phantom. As the air trembled, the air became slightly sticky. He directly grasped the tip of the broken sword in his hand and quickly struck out. Poof! A warrior who had just jumped down from the roof did not even have time to land before the tip of the sword sank into his neck. He instantly fell to the ground and stopped moving. Wang Peng was indeed a powerhouse in the inner refinement advanced stage. The long sword in his hand was the famous split-wave saber that he had exchanged from Ziyue. It was obvious that the split-wave saber in his hand had been specially repaired. The cracks on the blade had been repaired, and it was as smooth as a mirror. It had once again become tough and sharp. At this moment, he struck out. The long sword swept out, and in the blink of an eye, 2 of the Nine Seals sect disciples who were charging towards him were caught up in it. However, the advantage was only temporary. Very soon, the rest of the Nine Seals sect rushed over. Some of the warriors who were armed with crossbows even drew their bows and shot arrows. The sharp arrows flew at high speed amidst the vibrating bowstrings. Very soon, someone was hit. 2 of you, come with me to hold him back. Li Qingsong, by Fei Hong, you 2 go and kill the others first. A burly man with a long spear pointed at Wang Peng with lightning speed. This man was the strongest in the Nine Seals sect, Yu Gang, who was in the inner refinement intermediate stage. Because he knew that his strength was weaker than Wang Peng, he decided to let the others deal with him together. As for the other 2, Li Qingsong and Bai Feihong, their strength had also reached the inner refinement realm. The 3 of them were the 3 main subordinates of Elder Guo Yun of the Nine Seals sect. Alright, I love torturing people to death. Bai Feihong laughed sinisterly. Without thinking, he rushed towards Ziyue. Previously, from afar, he had already noticed that Ziyue was different. Especially when he saw the black god's saber in his hand, his eyes flashed with a burning desire. A treasured saber. He believed that his eyesight was amazing and he would never mistake it. Li Qingsong's eyes flashed with resentment. He had no choice but to choose Dong Wenwu on the other side. You've picked the wrong opponent. Ziyue's cold voice was heard. He took a step forward and it sounded like thunder. Energy flowed through his body like a fried dough twist. His body was as swift as a cheetah and he rushed towards Bai Feihong. Clang! The long saber that was as black as ink turned into rolling thunder and came crashing down. You're just borrowing the power of a weapon. I'll kill you in 3 moves. Bai Feihong snorted and looked up. The moment he saw his opponent's long saber, he was shocked. This saber was different from what he had imagined. Watching from afar, he only felt that Ziyue's saber skills were ordinary except for its speed. The reason why he was able to kill so many disciples of the Nine Seals sect was because of the sharpness of his long saber. The speed of the slash was peerlessly fast. In addition to the tough and sharp blade, ordinary people would be killed before they could even react. Even if they could react, they could only raise their saber to block. However, when his opponent had a treasured saber in hand, his weapon could be easily broken and then killed. At this moment, when he was facing Ziyue's long saber, he suddenly understood that his opponent's saber skills were extraordinary. Just as his opponent's long saber was about to fall, his mind was affected in an instant and he almost fell into it. When his mind broke free from this inexplicable influence, the long saber was already above his head. He did not even have time to retreat. Instinctively, he raised his long saber and met the attack. Clang! He blocked it. Joy flashed in his eyes. The long saber in his hand was not a piece of junk. Even if it was a treasured saber, it could not be easily cut in half. However, his opponent's strength seemed to be a little too strong. Just as doubts arose in his mind, he saw Xiu's long black saber rolling up again, turning into rolling waves and sweeping over. Once again, his mind was affected and his eyes were in a trance for a moment. No, I can't look at his saber. Bai Feihong was shocked and raised his long saber again. Clang! He blocked it again. Joy once again appeared in his eyes, but immediately after, his heart was filled with boundless anger and shame. Since when did he fall to the point where he could be complacent just because he blocked the attack of an inner refinement stage practitioner? Counterattack, he had to counterattack. Bai Feihong's heart surged, the inner strength in his dantian churned violently and quickly rushed out. The long saber in his hand, at this moment, even emitted a faint light. Suddenly, he felt a chill in his chest and could not help but lower his head in shock. But he just happened to see a blade as black as ink, directly piercing into his chest. How is this possible? When did this happen? Just as this thought appeared in his mind, boundless pain almost drowned him. As he was dying, he faintly heard a low sigh. Then, he sank into boundless darkness, never to wake up again. Kill me with 3 sabers? But you did not even block 3 sabers of mine. Xiu's long saber twisted slightly and pulled out the black divine saber. With the increase of his strength, Xiu's strength and speed had unknowingly undergone a metamorphosis. Even if he deliberately suppressed it and did not use inner strength, the strength of his body and the speed of his saber were like heaven and earth compared to when he was in the inner refinement stage. Therefore, although this last saber seemed incomparably swift, it was the result of him deliberately suppressing it. But even so, his opponent was unable to block it, which naturally made him sigh. Chapter 211. Boom! The sound of a house collapsing could be heard as Wang Peng's saber light swept across the area. Even though Yu Gang had 2 experts at the later stage of the inner refinement realm helping him, he could only passively take Wang Peng's attacks as he retreated. In the blink of an eye, he had rushed into the wooden house at the side. Under the intense battle, the wooden hut collapsed. Countless pieces of rubble rolled down, creating a loud crashing sound. In comparison, Dong Wenwu was definitely at a disadvantage. Li Qingsong was good at using a long whip. When he lashed out with his whip, there was no shadow of the whip, but the sound of the whip could be heard first, causing people to panic. Dong Wenwu's swordsmanship was not bad, but when faced with a long whip, the agility and swiftness of his swordsmanship could not be unleashed. Often, when the sound of the whip exploding in the air could be heard, the long whip had already landed on his body, causing his skin to split open and his flesh to become a bloody mess. Occasionally, he would use his sword to block the whip's attack, but the soft end of the long whip would land on his body at an even faster speed. In just a short period of time, there were 7 to 8 whip marks on his body. The whip marks, coupled with the burning of Li Qingsong's inner strength, caused him to bleed profusely and his injuries to worsen. He could not hold on any longer. "Brother Bai, help me!" In the midst of the chaos, Li Qingsong saw that Xiu had taken care of his opponent first. Even though he was extremely surprised, he still shouted for help. "It's too late to ask for help now." Li Qingsong let out a sinister laugh. The long whip suddenly coiled around Li Qingsong's sword and the hand holding the sword, tightly binding them together. Then, his body was like a phantom as he lightly tapped on the ground and quickly arrived in front of Dong Wenwu. His palm pressed down in an instant. 9 Seal Faction's secret technique, 9 Seal Palm. Dong Wenwu used all his strength to break free, but he could not break free from the whip's shackles. He was panicking and his breathing almost stopped. His eyelids twitched and his mind went blank. It's over. Suddenly, Li Qingsong's expression changed and the palm print that was about to hit Gaia missed. Then, his body flew back at an even faster speed. Clang! Boom! At that moment, a long saber shot toward Li Qingsong's head like a bolt of lightning. At this moment, if he did not retreat, even if he was able to smash Dong Wenwu's head with his palm, he himself would be pierced through by the long blade and die. Li Qingsong had always cherished his life. Naturally, he wasn't willing to trade his life for another's. Thus, he directly dodged and retreated. As for that long blade, its remaining power did not decrease in the slightest. It directly smashed into the wooden wall and completely destroyed it. At this moment it was Ziyue who made his move. Because the distance was rather far, Bai Feihong's long blade on the ground just happened to roll by his feet, so he took the opportunity to throw it out. In order to achieve the effect of a rescue, he did not even bother to hide this slash and directly poured in a stream of inner energy. It was just that no one noticed this. The moment Bai Ziyue struck out with his long saber, he did not hesitate to charge at Li Qingsong. But there was the sound of a long whip. The whip was like a spirit snake and directly pounced on Ziyue. The long whip was at least 3 meters long. Even if Ziyue's bladesmanship was amazing, it was difficult for him to hurt Li Qingsong at this moment. However, in the face of this attack, Ziyue did not panic at all. He turned his head slightly and avoided the attack of the long whip. Then, at the moment when the power of the long whip was exhausted and was about to be pulled away by Li Qingsong, a hand stretched out like a phantom. As he fiddled with the whip, he quickly grasped the end of the long whip and twisted it forcefully. Bang! Both parties exerted strength and stretched. As the whip trembled, the air exploded. Let go! Li Qingsong sneered. With a shake of his arm, his inner energy rolled up and the long whip turned into a wave and shot out directly. The surging force was like a spirit snake spitting out its tongue, making swishing sounds. Let go! At the same time, Ziyue also shouted. As his muscles and bones trembled, the surging force was quickly twisted into one. Then, it was turned into the power of the straight punch and infused into the long whip. At the same time, his footsteps trembled and the bricks on the ground shattered. Ziyue's figure was as swift as a leopard as he rushed in front of his opponent. Puff! The two forces suddenly exploded, causing the long whip to tremble and distort. As the surging force rolled up, Ziyue and Li Qingsong's hands went numb at the same time and they both loosened their grip. How is this possible? Li Qingsong was so shocked that his face was trembling. How could an inner refinement stage martial artist's force attack be comparable to his, a martial artist who had already reached the inner realm? In a panic, he hurriedly reached out again and grabbed the long whip that was about to fall to the ground. Just as he was about to exert force, he suddenly saw that Ziyue had already closed in on him. He raised his blade and slashed down like a Gaia. This slash was as black as ink, but it had a kind of agility that stirred the wind and clouds, causing the air to tremble. The moment he saw the blade, Li Qingsong's heart flashed with confusion for a moment. Then, his face was filled with incomparable shock. This slash was unusual. Previously, he was still puzzled as to why Bai Feihong was killed so quickly by Ziyue, who was far weaker than them. Even if Ziyue's strength was strong, it should not be to this extent. After all, there was a realm between the two of them. The gap was as huge as a chasm. It was only now that he saw this slash that he truly understood how terrifying it was when the saber technique reached its peak. Even though he had regained his clarity, the pressure from the blade that was about to descend still caused him to feel a sharp pain between his eyebrows and his scalp to go numb. Swoosh! Li Qingsong's throat surged. Under the control of his inner strength, his long whip turned into a spirit snake and shot up. At the same time, his body arched and as light as a swallow, he quickly retreated behind him. In the face of Ziyue's overbearing and unstoppable slash, he could only retreat. However, just as he was retreating and was about to dodge Ziyue's black god saber, a long sword silently pierced through. Poof! The long sword pierced through Li Qingsong's back and directly through his heart. The inner strength that was released caused the tip of the sword to vibrate lightly, and the drops of blood that were stained on it were flung away. It was Dong Wenwu who had made his move. In the face of a strong enemy like Ziyue, Li Qingsong did not dare to be distracted. Naturally, he did not notice Dong Wenwu who was approaching him unknowingly. Defeat and death were inevitable. "Brother Bai, thank you for saving me." At this point, Dong Wenwu finally relaxed and said, "It's nothing," Ziyue said. He did not pay any more attention to Li Qingsong. His body moved and he quickly rushed to the other side of the battlefield. Compared to them, Pei Tun and the others were in a perilous situation. Dong Wenwu naturally knew that this was not the time for pleasantries and thanks. He also rushed to the other side. A scream of agony was heard. Boom! Then, there was the sound of wood shavings and a figure rolled out of a wooden house. After a few rolls, the scream was cut short. On the ground, there was a pool of crimson blood dyeing a large area. Then, a man in his 30s with a long saber in his hand walked out quickly. He was tall and had an extraordinary aura. It was Wang Peng. After a fierce battle, he had successfully killed all his opponents and walked out of the wooden house. "Run!" A Nine Seal sect disciple yelled, and turned to run without hesitation. Originally, they had 3 inner strength experts on their side. With their advantage in numbers, even if they did not succeed in their sneak attack, they should have been able to kill all of their opponents. They did not expect the situation to be reversed in such a short time. 3 inner strength experts were killed and many Nine Seal sect disciples were slaughtered. They had completely lost their chance of winning. With fear in their hearts, they could only run. The remaining 7 to 8 Nine Seal sect disciples did not hesitate and turned to run. However, right at that moment, an old man wearing embroidered clothes and a white beard rapidly walked over from afar like a flying wild goose. Then, with a slap of his palm, he killed the person who shouted and fled first. "I'm not dead yet? Who dares to talk about running?" The figure landed lightly on the ground, and his deep voice spread throughout the battlefield. The remaining 9 Seal sect disciples trembled and called out respectfully, "Elder Guiyun?" Ziyue's expression changed. The person who came was the elder of the 9 Seal sect that Wang Peng had mentioned. Guiyun was seriously injured and had been hiding in the mountain gate of the 9 Seal sect to recuperate. Dong Wenwu, who was already pale due to his injuries, turned even paler. He could not help but feel a chill in his heart. Even if a third-rate expert was injured, they would not be able to defeat him. Not to mention, his complexion was ruddy and his breathing was steady. How did he look like he was injured? In comparison, Wang Peng's shock was even greater. He had been complacent because he had killed a strong opponent in a big battle. Who knew that he would suddenly see a person who should not be here appear in front of him? In shock, he could not help but say bitterly, "You're not, Nie Yunhao's strength is not weak, but I'm not weak either." If he had not secretly broken through to the second-rate expert level, he would not be my match. Fortunately, the 9 Seal sect has a strong foundation. Healing my small injury is not a problem. Guiyun sneered. However, he was rejoicing in his heart. Fortunately, the D family had been supporting the sect recently. Although the D family was restricted by the rules of the Lin family and could not make a move, they had given him all kinds of elixirs. Although a spiritual recovery elixir did not heal his injuries completely, it had recovered more than 80%. It would not affect his combat strength too much. Suddenly, His gaze turned to the 9 Seal sect disciples and he asked, "Where are you, gang, and the rest?" "Dead, they were all killed by them." The disciple who was questioned turned pale and said in a trembling voice, "What?" Chapter 2:12. Taking advantage of Guiyun's question, Wang Peng's face was pale, but he quickly said, "Brother Bai, Brother Dong, I admit defeat this time. With our strength, we are definitely not this old man's match, even if we work together. I am very clear about the difference between a third-rate master and a normal inner force practitioner. Not to mention, this old man is at the peak of a third-rate master. All 12 of his meridians are unblocked. Even in the hands of a second-rate master, he can survive. So, the moment this old man makes his move, we must scatter and escape. Perhaps we will have a chance of survival." As he said this, Wang Peng's face revealed a trace of bitterness. Among the 3 of them, he had the highest realm and the strongest ability. It was obvious that Guiyun's first target would be him. Therefore, his chances of survival were the slimmest. But now that things had come to this, he could only give it his all. Giving up without putting up a fight was not his style. "Actually, there is no need to escape." Suddenly Ziyue spoke. "What?" Dong Wenwu, who was at the side, was startled. "Good, you guys are very good. Since that is the case, then the few of you can go and accompany them in death." Hearing that his 3 subordinates had been killed by Ziyue and the rest, Guiyun's face changed. He took a deep breath, and his gaze instantly became incomparably cold. A powerful aura rose. Even though there was a distance of more than 10 meters, it gave people an extremely horrifying sense of oppression. "Run!" Wang Peng was frightened. He shouted and turned around instantly. Dong Wenwu, who was at the side, did not hesitate. He immediately channeled his inner force into his legs and used a qigong. Beside them, there were only 3 inner refinement level martial artists left after the great battle. Even though some of them were injured, they still quickly got up, not caring about the wounds that had ruptured due to the surge of qi and blood, as well as the blood that was spurting out from the wounds. "I said, there is no need to escape," Ziyue roared. At this moment, the aura on his body suddenly rose rapidly. An aura that belonged to the inner force realm rose up. Following that, it was the level of a third-rate master. Early third-rate expert, middle third-rate expert, late third-rate expert. Guiyun's expression changed as he was about to attack. His footsteps came to a halt, and he couldn't help but feel a little bewildered. Similarly, Wang Peng, Dong Wenwu and the rest, who had originally wanted to run for their lives, also stopped in their tracks with faces full of shock. Their eyes were filled with disbelief. Third-rate expert? When had Ziyue's strength reached the level of a third-rate master? And it didn't seem to be just that. Ziyue's momentum didn't stop even after reaching the late stage of a third-rate expert. Instead, it continued to climb. Soon, he reached the same level as Guiyun, a peak third-rate expert. Peak third-rate expert. Dong Wenwu's jaw dropped. No, not just that. A second-rate master. He's a second-rate expert now. Wang Peng was stunned. How could this be? Even though he had long believed that Ziyue's strength was extraordinary, he still found it hard to believe that his strength had reached the level of a second-rate master. One had to know that even his father was only a late-stage third-rate expert. How old was Ziyue? How many years had he been practicing martial arts? Middle-stage second-rate expert. When Ziyue's momentum climbed to the level of a mid-stage second-rate expert, it finally stopped. That completely released momentum was like a dark cloud in a stormy weather. The oppressive feeling of a thunderstorm that was about to pour down made one's mind uneasy. I had intended to get along with you as an ordinary person, but what I got in return was indifference. So, I'll stop pretending and lay out my cards. In fact, I'm really a second-rate expert. Ziyue's face was serious. Coupled with his high-spirited manner, even though they felt a little strange, It really frightened everyone, including Guiyun, who was at the peak of a third-rate expert. Beside Guiyun, the disciples of the Nine Seals sect, who had planned to return for revenge, all turned pale. Deep in their hearts, boundless fear spread, making them horrified. Second-rate expert? Why would such an expert appear here? Is it fun to bully us weaklings? Brother Bai, I didn't expect you to hide so well. What's there to be afraid of? Kill him. Wang Ping was overjoyed and turned back in an instant. Dong Wenwu and the others were also excited. A second-rate expert had a strong deterrent force at any time, let alone now when facing a third-rate expert, Guiyun, who was at the peak of a third-rate expert, directly deciding the outcome of the battle. "All right," Ziyue shouted. His momentum was so high that it seemed to be able to stir up the wind and clouds. "I'll let you go today." Guiyun was terrified and his scalp tingled. He roared and turned to flee without hesitation. His movement was extremely fast, as light as a leopard cat. In just a few ups and downs, he appeared at the end of the street and disappeared in a flash. Kill. Seeing this, Wang Peng and Dong Wenwu were immediately excited. They quickly caught up with the disciples of the Nine Seals sect. Their attacks were swift and ruthless. In the blink of an eye, they killed all 7 or 8 disciples of the Nine Seals sect. Only then did Wang Peng and Dong Wenwu realize that Ziyue was standing in the same spot and did not move at all. They could not help but ask curiously, "Brother Bai, what's wrong? You shouldn't have let Guiyun escape just now. Killing him would be a great contribution to the sect." "That's right, but I really didn't expect Brother Bai to be so strong." A second-rate expert. Even if we include the newly promoted Elder Nyeyunhao, there are only 4 people in the sect who have reached that level. Now there should be a 5th. Dong Wenwu, who was standing at the side, also sighed and said with a proud tone, "Do you really think that I'm a second-rate expert?" Ziyue smiled helplessly. As he spoke, the wild aura on his body weakened instantly and continued to decline. In the blink of an eye, his aura declined from the mid-level of a second-rate expert all the way to a third-rate expert, the inner force realm, and only stopped when he reached the internal refinement realm. This, Wang Peng opened his mouth. Dong Wenwu and the others, who were originally excited and surprised, were also stunned. What was going on? Do you know about the breath-concealing incantation? This breath-concealing incantation is, in essence, a martial art that conceals one's qi and blood. But very few people know that by circulating the breath-concealing incantation in the opposite direction, one's own qi and blood can rapidly increase to a level that far exceeds one's original strength. The reason why my aura is so strong is not because of my own strength, but because of the effect of the breath-concealing incantation. Ziyue explained. Of course, to release one's own aura to the level of a second-rate expert, even a martial artist who had also cultivated the breath-concealing incantation to perfection would find it difficult to do so. This was because his own strength was already very strong. Naturally, he could easily figure out the aura of a second-rate expert. If possible, he would rather not expose his own strength too much. You can do that? So, just now we actually took a trip around the gates of hell? If Guiyun had sensed it, wouldn't that mean? Wang Peng and Dong Wenwu broke out in cold sweat almost at the same time. Thinking of how arrogant they were just now, they couldn't help but feel relieved. Fortunately, they had scared off Elder Guiyun of the Nine Seal sect, or they would have been finished. The remaining few people looked at each other in dismay, and all of them revealed expressions of lingering fear. If that's the case, we can't stay here any longer. Once Guiyun recovers, we'll be in danger. As Wang Peng spoke, he immediately gave up his original plan. He quickly turned around, intending to rush back. Ha, I see. I was wondering why I felt that something was wrong. So it's just a method of using qi and blood. Right at this moment, a deep and resounding laughter was heard. Immediately after, Guiyun, who had already disappeared, immediately rushed over with astonishing speed. I have to say, you're very smart and very brave, but because of that, you'll definitely die today. The strong can't be humiliated, let alone lied to. You'll have to pay the price for fooling me. Guiyun's voice was like a rolling wave, rolling over. We're finished. Wang Peng's entire body was cold. At this moment, he had even lost the courage to escape. Guiyun's return immediately put them in an extremely perilous situation. There was a trace of despair in the eyes of the others. The speed of a peak third-rate expert was too fast for them. It was as swift as lightning. They calculated that even if they scattered and escaped, they would not be able to escape the pursuit of such an expert. Price. Ziyue was not flustered at all. His face was full of calmness. He said, "Do you really think that I don't have any means to deal with you?" Guiyun was surprised for a moment. Then, his face was filled with anger. He said coldly, "You're just an ant. Who can you scare? In this world, strength is everything." As he spoke, he sped up. In an instant, he was right in front of Ziyue. "Then die." Ziyue sighed. Then, he took out a thick piece of animal skin from his chest. On the animal skin, there were dense and complicated engravings. It was mysterious and powerful. Even from afar, one could vaguely feel an extremely oppressive aura from the animal skin. It made one uneasy. Talisman. The animal skin was the talisman that Ziyue had drawn. Moreover, it was the most powerful talisman that he could draw, the transformation talisman of the Thunderfall technique. It surged with all its might and exploded slightly on the talisman. Bang! The talisman in Ziyue's hand was activated in an instant. The moment it was torn to pieces by a majestic force, a huge and thick dark cloud appeared in the void. Oh no! Guiyun's expression changed drastically. His heart was filled with panic. He immediately fled at a speed faster than when he came. Talisman? Celestial method? How could it be? He did not have the slightest intention to resist. He only wanted to escape as soon as possible. However, it was too late. Whoosh! Thunder and lightning exploded. There was no delay at all and it quickly struck down. Boom! Chapter 213. Boom! How fast was the speed of the lightning strike? It was as if there was no pause at all from the moment it condensed to the moment it landed. Guiyun had just turned around when the lightning strike landed on his body. Even though he had enveloped himself with his vigorous internal energy, the violent internal energy still penetrated his body in an instant. Ah! Guiyun screamed miserably. The hair on his head stood on end. The immense pain made him scream like a ghost wailing and a wolf howling. Whoosh! Without any preparation, the second lightning strike followed closely behind the first one. Whoosh! 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 Then came the third, the fourth. After 9 strikes, the dark clouds dissipated and a ray of sunlight shone down from the sky. However, only a charred black remained on the ground. Guiyun, who was at the peak of the third-rate expert, had completely lost his life the moment the third lightning strike struck. The remaining 6 lightning strikes had almost refined his entire body. Wang Peng swallowed a mouthful of blood. His face was filled with panic and even a trace of fear. This kind of power, this kind of method, was too powerful and too frightening. Brother, by what you just used, could it be the legendary immortal technique? Dong Wenwu hesitated for a moment before carefully approaching. His eyes could not help but look at the charred black not far away. It was a tragic sight that made his face twitch. It should be a kind of talisman, right? I heard from my father that martial artists can also use immortal techniques by activating talismans. However, according to the power of talismans that I have seen before, it is definitely not as powerful as the one that Brother Bai used. Wang Peng looked at the talisman residue that had already turned into fragments at Ziyue's feet. Realization dawned on his face as he hurriedly spoke. It's a talisman. I obtained it by chance and it can be considered my final trump card. However, I did not expect it to be used up here. Ziue was still thinking about how to explain, so he took the opportunity to explain. At the same time, it also blocked their other thoughts. That's truly a pity. Wang Peng originally wanted to inquire about some matters related to the talisman. But a look of disappointment suddenly appeared on his face. He had no choice but to say, "Let's clean up the battlefield first. Then, put our brothers' bodies away." Next, we entered the Guo Manor. In addition, Brother Bai, you've contributed the most this time. In order to kill Guiyun, you even wasted a powerful talisman. Therefore, the ratio that I proposed before is somewhat inappropriate. How about this? Let's swap. You guys take 70% and we'll take 30%. Brother Wang is too polite. How about we split it 50-50? After all of you have contributed quite a bit. Moreover, the two who died were both your subordinates. You will need to arrange for their pensions, and the cost will not be small. As for talismans, they are meant to be used to kill and protect one's life, so there's no need to waste them. Ziue said calmly. After all, the Nine Seals sect had the advantage in numbers in this battle. As such, 2 people from their side had also died. Furthermore, it was worth mentioning that the 2 people who had died were both Wang Peng's subordinates. As for Puppy Pei and Wu Ma by his side, although both of them were injured, they would only need to rest for 10 days to half a month to recover. This was also the reason why he was willing to give in. All right, it's settled then. Wang Peng looked at his 2 trusted subordinates who were lying on the ground not far away and did not refuse. For them who had been in the martial world, cleaning up the battlefield was naturally easy. They collected the valuables from the corpses, as well as their weapons, and hid them in one of the houses. Wu Ma, who was the most severely injured, guarded the place. Soon, the group stepped into Guiyun's Guo Banji's mansion. Almost without any resistance, the group easily occupied the Guo Manor and began to plunder. After interrogating Guiyun's second concubine, the group easily opened the secret chamber where the treasures were hidden. Hiss! Pei Tugu sucked in a breath of cold air and exclaimed, "No wonder Guiyun is called Guo Banji outside. If these chests are filled with silver, then it would add up to at least 10,000 taels, right?" In the secret chamber, there were a total of 10 chests. Some of them were directly opened and shone with silver light under the candlelight. Wang Peng's subordinate, the last internal refinement realm martial artist, couldn't help but step forward and open the 10 large chests. The brilliance of the jewels flourished. Pieces of gold, silver, and many other sparkling and translucent jewels, jades, and agates made people's breathing quicken upon seeing them. If not for the fact that Ziue and Wang Peng did not say anything, they would have rushed forward to snatch the treasures. 10,000 taels of silver? We have really underestimated Guo Banji. But all these silver and gems add up to at least 10,000 taels of silver. If we include the title deeds and accounts books, it will be more than 200,000 taels of silver. Dong Wenwu snorted and said, "The 10 chests did not only contain silver and gems. One of the chests was filled with accounts books and other items. Another chest contained the title deeds of the house. But what really belonged to Ziue and Wang Peng was the last chest. Secret manual. Secret martial arts manuals. 9 seal palm, heavenly pillar sword technique, green smoke sword technique, 7 profound invisible blade technique, blazing blade technique, demon sealing staff technique, poison dragon whip technique, great monument breaking hand, golden Buddha finger, nimble snake steps." Ziue and Wang Peng were dazzled by all the secret martial arts manuals. This Guiyun, could it be that he copied all the secret martial arts manuals of the Nine Seal sect? Ziue could not help but ask. I don't think so. There are some martial arts that even he does not have access to. For example, the 9 seal palm only has the cultivation method of the first 6 palms. The complete 9 palms are not recorded. Also, the 9 Seal Sect's Commandment Hall Master Situ Ming's 6 Sun Technique and 8 Strikes of the Serpent Dragon are not included. Especially the 6 Sun Technique. It is said to be the secret martial arts of the Celestial Martial Sect that flourished 300 years ago. It has a trace of immortal characteristics and is very powerful. However, even so, there are so many secret martial arts manuals. If we study them carefully, it will also be of great help to our martial arts cultivation. The harvest can be said to be great. Moreover, if we provide them to the gang, as long as it is something that our Scorching Sun gang does not have, we will also get a share of the contribution. The harvest will also be great. As Wang Ping said this, a trace of light flashed in his eyes. Celestial Martial Sect? What sect is that? Ziyue could not help but ask. From what he said, it seemed to be a sect that combined immortal arts and martial arts. I don't know much about the Celestial Martial Sect. I only know that it was a powerful sect 300 years ago. It is said that the location of the sect is within the borders of our Sky Spirit County. Of course, I do not know the exact location. This sect advocated the cultivation of immortal arts and martial arts. Not only were there Xiantian experts in the sect, there were also people who cultivated immortal arts that were stronger than Xiantian experts. However, for some unknown reason, such a powerful sect was destroyed 300 years ago. The 6 Sun art that the 9 Seals sect's law enforcement hall master cultivated was said to be a cultivation technique passed down from the Celestial Martial Sect. It was not the slightest bit weaker than our Scorching Sun gang's Scorching Sun art. Wang Ping explained. I see. Ziyue nodded and did not ask further. Naturally, it was not that convenient to just move the 10 big boxes. Under Dong Wenwu's arrangement, the group quickly found some carts and other items. They directly loaded all the boxes onto the carts. In addition to the other valuables, they filled up 3 carts. Returning with a rewarding journey, even Ziyue could not help but reveal a trace of excitement. The harvest this time was indeed great. Not to mention the silver, jewels and other valuables, just the streets, houses, shops and the deeds to the 3,000 mu of fertile land outside the city were already a huge sum of money. In total, they estimated that there was about 260,000 taels of silver. According to the calculation of 50-50, Ziyue would receive 130,000 taels of silver. Even if they still had to split it with Pei Tuzi and Wu Mer, at most 30,000 taels of silver would be enough. They did not dare to have any complaints about this. For some stingy ones, it was already good enough to give a few thousand taels of silver as compensation. In other words, Ziyue would have at least 100,000 taels of silver in his pocket this time. Apart from that, the martial arts manuals were also very valuable. It was enough to strengthen the foundation of a family and cultivate countless martial artists. It could even be used to form a martial arts aristocratic family. The journey was smooth. Ziyue and the rest returned to the Scorching Sun gang's territory. Soon, they heard that the 5 elders and 7 hall masters of the Scorching Sun gang had attacked together and defeated many experts of the 9 Seals sect. Now, there was almost no one from the 9 Seals sect in the entire Wujiang County. They had all retreated to the mountain gate of the 9 Seals sect, Mount Yuhua, which was 10 miles away from Wujiang County. Looks like we will be able to completely destroy the 9 Seals sect soon. Wang Ping said excitedly. That's for sure. Our sect leader hasn't made his move yet. Although Zhuo Qingyang, the sect leader of the 9 Seals sect, is also a first-class expert, he was completely suppressed in the battle with our sect leader 3 years ago. After 3 years, our sect leader's strength has improved greatly. Naturally, Zhuo Qingyang is no match for him. Dong Wenwu said excitedly. Ziyue did not say anything. For some reason, he felt uneasy. He vaguely remembered the D family's 9th-level Qi refinement practitioner he had met in the Foggy Valley. The strength of a martial artist and a cultivator of the immortal arts were blurred. But even Ziyue had to admit that immortal arts were actually superior to martial arts. The 9th level of the Qi Refinement Realm was the peak of the Qi Refinement Realm. In terms of realm, he should be on par with a first-class expert. But his means of killing enemies were much stronger than that of a first-class expert. If this expert at the 9th level of the Qi Refinement Realm were to join the battle between the two forces, it would be difficult to predict the outcome of the battle. Could Jiang Tao, the sect leader of the Scorching Sun Gang, stand against this D family practitioner of the immortal arts? Not to mention Zhuo Qingyang, the sect leader of the Nine Seals sect. Chapter 214. I didn't think that I would have accumulated so much wealth. After returning to his residence, Ziyue looked at the countless treasures in his secret room, as well as the many deeds for houses and lands in a large box. He couldn't help but sigh. Strength really determined too many things. When he was still a young man in a mountain village, his life was so poor that he could only eat meat during festivals. But now, as long as he wanted to, he could enjoy luxurious clothing and food at any time. The 100,000 taels of silver this time, as well as the money, deeds, and other things that the old loose cultivator, old Mr. Wu, had sent over, as well as his own savings. Just a rough estimate would be more than 200,000 taels of silver. Perhaps it wasn't enough to call him a tycoon, but it was enough for him to live comfortably for the rest of his life. However, although the life of a rich man is good, it's not what I want. It's just ordinary wealth, enough for me to use. What I truly value is strength. Ziyue thought to himself as he looked at his status panel. Spiritual energy, 68122. Seeing this, he couldn't help but smile. 68,000 points of spirit energy was not a lot. At least, it was not a lot to him right now. But it was enough for him to make another breakthrough in his strength. The war is about to start. Even if my strength isn't weak, it's still not safe. I'll raise my martial strength to a second-rate expert first. As he thought about this, Bai Ziyue couldn't help but look at the Purple Mansion creation technique in his stats window. In reality, what he wanted to raise was the strength of his immortal cultivation art. It was just that the amount of spiritual energy needed to raise from the 7th layer of the Qi refining stage to the 8th layer of the Qi refining stage was too great. With his 60,000 points of spiritual energy, it was far from enough. Consume 30,000 points of spiritual energy to open the Enwei Meridian in the 8 Extraordinary Meridians chapter of the Purple Kingdom Creation Art. Open. Consume 30,000 points of spiritual energy to open the Enwei Meridian in the 8 Extraordinary Meridians chapter of the Purple Kingdom Creation Art. Open. Without any hesitation, Ziyue spent 60,000 points of spiritual energy to open his 2 mysterious meridians. At this moment, the inner strength in his body boiled and turned into a turbulent river, rushing directly into the Yin linking meridian and Yang linking meridian. The seemingly endless inner strength surged like a sharp knife, directly opening up the 2 mysterious meridians. Then, it continued to expand, making them spacious and tough, enough to withstand the powerful impact of the inner strength without being damaged. At the same time, Ziyue's Dantian had more than doubled in size. The inner strength in his Dantian had become turbulent and powerful. With just a slight exhale, the inner strength in his body gushed out. Puff! A dense purple inner force shot out and landed on a chair 1 meter away. Chi! 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 The chair was pushed a few meters away. Ziyue then looked at the surface of the chair. Tiny, densely packed marks were clearly visible on the surface of the chair. It was a ghastly sight. His inner strength is more than a meter away from his body, but it still has a powerful killing power. Ziyue's eyes lit up, and he couldn't help but feel excited. He still remembered the scene when he had achieved great success in the Dhyana stance. Compared to before, the current him was more than 10 times or even 100 times stronger. Moreover, He could clearly feel that the speed at which he controlled his inner strength was at least twice as fast as before. Correspondingly, when he used martial arts to attack, his speed had also increased by a fold. With the strength of my inner strength now, if I use the Tyrant Blade technique, I can probably kill Guiyun with one slash. Even Yu Yong, the Hall Master of the Battle Hall of the Nine Seals sect, who has already reached the level of a second-rate master, would only need a few more slashes to kill him. He made a slight comparison and had a plan in his mind. Previously, when he had just broken through to the peak of a third-rate master, it took him a lot of effort to kill Yu Yong. Now, he estimated that it would take him at most 3 slashes to kill Yu Yong. Then, he looked at the attribute panel again. When he saw that in the martial arts realm column, it showed that he was indeed a second-rate master, he felt a burst of joy in his heart. My strength has broken through, and my inner strength has become vigorous and powerful. It has also greatly increased the effectiveness of the Golden Bell shield that I'm cultivating. The Golden Bell shield that would have taken me at least a few days to get started, I estimate that it will only take me a day at most to get started. As Ziyue thought to himself, he could not help but feel relieved. In the cultivation of martial arts, one's realm was the most important. When one's realm had increased, it would naturally be much easier to cultivate various martial arts technique. The Golden Bell shield was the same for the martial arts technique, as well as the various saber techniques, sword techniques, and martial arts technique. Just as he was about to let go of his thoughts and start cultivating the Golden Bell shield, his expression suddenly changed, revealing a trace of surprise. It was at this moment that he felt a vibration coming from his storage pouch. Even though it was very subtle, he had already refined the storage pouch, so he could still sense it. Suppressing his worry, Ziyue's mind power surged into the storage pouch in an instant. Soon, he revealed a stunned expression. In an instant, a round plate appeared in his hand. A communication plate. This was the communication plate that the old wandering cultivator, Old Wu, had given to him back then for easy communication. However, at this moment, the communication stone in the center of the communication plate, which had been stained with Old Wu's mind imprint, had shattered. The communication stone is the foundation of communication. It has been stained with the mind imprint of the owner of the communication plate. With the help of the Dharma artifact's restrictive power, this mind imprint can be activated, allowing the holder of the communication plate to contact the owner of the mind imprint from a distance. However, now that the communication stone has shattered and the mind imprint has dissipated, it can only mean one thing. The old wandering cultivator, Old Wu, is dead. Ziyue's voice suddenly lowered, and a trace of complex emotions involuntarily appeared in his eyes. The last time he had contacted Old Wu, he had mentioned that he wanted to go into seclusion to cultivate and break through the bottleneck of his realm. He did not expect that only 10 days had passed, and Old Wu had already died. Even if he was not completely certain, the fact that the communication stone had shattered was enough to prove everything. As expected, there is a huge barrier between the qi condensation and the aperture awakening stage. Many cultivators have diligently and tirelessly cultivated. Among them, there is no lack of geniuses and true disciples of large sections. However, all of them are blocked outside this barrier. Even a veteran cultivator like Old Wu, who had cultivated for more than 100 years, was unable to break through. He could only turn into a cup of yellow dust and disappear into thin air. I wonder if I can successfully break through and reach the aperture awakening stage when I reach the 9th level of the qi condensation stage? Ziyue could not help but feel a little heavy as he thought about this. Perhaps the attribute panel can resolve this crisis. Otherwise, I can only think of a way to obtain the barrier-breaking pill and the aperture awakening pill. Ziyue's thoughts flashed, but in the end, they turned into a sigh. Early the next morning, The last strand of morning sun-purple chi was absorbed into his body and transformed into surging spiritual power. Ziyue quickly finished his work and went straight out the door. Soon, he appeared in the Scorching Sun Gang's headquarters. The battle between the Scorching Sun Gang and the Nine Seals sect had become the talk of the town in Wujiang County. The atmosphere in the Scorching Sun Gang was completely different as a result, especially after the previous day, when the 5 elders and 7 branch leaders worked together to completely wipe out the Nine Seals sect in Wujiang County and beat them back. Instantly, the atmosphere in the gang was completely different. High spirits and complacency could be seen on the faces of almost every disciple of the Scorching Sun Gang. However, it was different from what most people had expected. The Scorching Sun Gang did not take advantage of the situation to launch a fierce attack on the Nine Seals sect and attack Mount Yuhua. Instead, the gang leader personally challenged Zhua Qingyang, the sect leader of the Nine Seals sect. The time was set for 3 days later. Actually, this is a very normal thing. Although Mount Yuhua is not a steep mountain range that is easy to defend and difficult to attack, it is still within the territory of the other party's forces. Charging up Mount Yuhua and destroying the Nine Seals sect's mountain gate would be satisfying, but the losses would be great. In order to reduce the casualties, the gang leader challenged the other party's sect leader to a battle to determine the winner. This is the most appropriate way. More than 10 years ago, the gang leader's 8 extraordinary meridians were already unblocked and he had broken through to the level of a first-class master. 3 years ago, when he fought Zhua Qingyang, the sect leader of the Nine Seals sect, even if it was just a test, he easily suppressed his opponent. Now that 3 years have passed, the gang leader's strength has greatly increased. Naturally, the sect leader of the Nine Seals sect is no match for him. Everything will be revealed in 3 days. After Ziyue stepped into the Scorching Sun Gang, he heard endless discussions about the upcoming battle between the gang leader, Jiang Tao, and the sect leader of the Nine Seals sect, Zhua Qingyang. At first, he was somewhat interested, but after encountering several groups of people who were talking about the same thing and had similar opinions, he lost interest. Soon, he stepped into the backyard of the Scorching Sun Gang. Without hesitation, Ziyue quickly entered a 3-story building with the help of his identity token. This building was none other than the library of the Scorching Sun Gang. Before the battle officially began, Ziyue finally couldn't wait any longer and decided to investigate the use of the incomparably hard metal plates. After all, the Scorching Sun Gang had been rooted here for decades and had collected a great deal of information. Perhaps it would be of some help to him. Soon, a day had passed. Only then did Ziyue walk out of the library. When he walked out of the library, his face was calm, but his eyes could not hide the excitement in them. 12 pieces of golden paper, a map to the treasure house. My previous guess was right. The golden paper is indeed a treasure map. However, it is different from ordinary treasure map. Only when all 12 pieces of the golden paper are collected, will it lead to the true location of the treasure house. And this treasure house is called the Immortal Martial Treasure House. It was the treasure house of the Immortal Martial sect 300 years ago. Ziyue's eyes flashed as he thought to himself. Chapter 215. The first time he heard of the Immortal Martial sect was when he was conversing with Wang Peng. From him, Ziyue knew that the Discipline Hall master of the Nine Seals sect, Ouyang Ming, cultivated the 6-yang art, which originated from the Immortal Martial sect. However, in comparison, the records of the Immortal Martial sect in the library are much more detailed. Although it didn't specify the reason for the destruction of the Immortal Martial sect, it did mention some of the history of the sect. Some information regarding the Immortal Martial sect flashed through Ziyue's mind. The Immortal Martial sect was established 800 years ago. The founder was actually a rogue cultivator called Su Chuchen, who was also known as the Chuchen Taoist. His strength wasn't considered strong. Although there weren't many records, Ziyue could guess that he shouldn't have reached the Xiantian or aperture opening realm. But his 7 disciples were all extraordinary. If they weren't aperture opening realm cultivators, then they were Xiantian realm cultivators. They directly strengthened the immortal martial sect. 300 years ago, before the immortal martial sect was destroyed, it could already be considered as a major immortal sect. The ultimate art of the sect, the immortal martial Tao, contained both immortal and martial. When one cultivated it to a certain level, one could even merge immortal and martial into one. The immortal martial Grand Palm had the agility of immortal arts, and the majesty of martial arts. It was extremely powerful. It's a pity that even such a major immortal martial sect couldn't escape its destruction. Also, 300 years ago the immortal martial country was established. Is there any connection? Ziyue thought in his heart and slowly shook his head, giving up on thinking. So what if it was related to the immortal martial country? It had nothing to do with him. It's said that the immortal martial treasure vault was specially set up by the sect leader of the immortal martial sect, Jiang Wudao, before the sect was destroyed. At that time, he had already predicted that the immortal martial sect would meet with a calamity. Only by gathering the 12 pieces of golden paper could one rely on the guidance of the golden paper to find the location of the immortal martial treasure vault. One could even borrow the power of the golden paper to open the vault. When the golden paper was first circulated, it attracted the attention of many people, causing chaos for a period of time. But now that 300 years had passed, the 12 pieces of golden paper had long been scattered everywhere, and it was difficult to find any traces of them. Even if there were still some people paying attention to it, there were very few of them. Although I have a total of 7 in my hands now, it is almost impossible to gather all of them. Unless… Wait a minute, maybe it's really possible, Ziyue thought to himself. Suddenly, his eyes lit up. He hastened his footsteps and returned to his residence. With a flick of his finger, a blood coagulation pill popped out and sent the excited puppy away. Ziyue went straight back to his room. His mental energy surged, and 7 pieces of golden paper appeared in front of him. Along with the 7 pieces of golden paper, there was also a jade slip. Of the 12 pieces of golden paper, I have 7 in my hands, and the other 5 are outside. If this method really works, I might really be able to gather all 12 pieces of golden paper. Ziyue took a deep breath and brought the jade map close to his forehead. After a long while, he put down the jade scroll. After a moment of silence, he revealed a look of joy. As expected, there are no useless spells, only people who don't know how to use them. I originally thought that this tracking spell from Su Pingxing would not be of much use to me for the time being, so I didn't practice it much. But I didn't expect that this spell would be useful for tracking the remaining pieces of golden paper. But if I want to really track the remaining pieces of golden paper from a long distance, I will need to practice this spell to a higher level. Ziyue sighed in his heart. He tried to figure it out and quickly understood the rune structure of this spell. Without hesitation, his mental energy surged and turned into streaks of invisible flowing light. They quickly sketched out complicated runes in his mind. 1 breath, 2 breaths, 3 breaths, after 5 breaths, a total of 9 runes were sketched out by him. Buzz! The spiritual energy in his body surged quickly and poured into the spell runes. The spell was completed. In an instant, a seemingly dim white light landed on a piece of golden paper. This was a tracking mark. It was formed by the spell. If the golden paper was lost, as long as the tracking mark was not removed, he could easily track its position through the spell. But if that was all, he naturally could not track the other pieces of golden paper. So soon, Ziyue's finger tapped on the golden paper again. Buzz! The tracking mark vibrated slightly. Vaguely, there seemed to be a layer of invisible waves that spread out. With a thought, Ziyue closed his eyes slightly. Suddenly, in his mind, besides the golden paper that he had used the tracking mark on, the other 6 pieces of golden paper clearly appeared. As expected, because these 12 pieces of golden paper are of the same origin, they were originally the same body. So, through the tracking mark of the tracking spell, I can also sense the position of the other pieces of golden paper. As for the range, Ziyue immediately began his experiment. He placed the remaining 6 pieces of golden paper away from the first piece of golden paper. Half an hour later, Ziyue put away the 7 pieces of golden paper again. 100 meters. In an empty and boundless space, I can only sense the position of the golden paper within 100 meters at most through the tracking spell. If there are buildings blocking the way, this range will be even smaller. Generally, it's only about 30 meters at most, which is the limit. If someone placed the golden paper in a secret room with thick walls, then even if it's 10 meters away, I probably won't be able to sense it. After experimenting for a while, Ziyue quickly came to a conclusion. At this distance, not to mention searching for the golden paper in a large area, even if it was only within Wujiang County, he would need at least a few years to find it. So, I need to cultivate this tracking spell as soon as possible. Then, I'll rely on my spiritual energy to raise it to a higher level. At that time, the range of the tracking spell will greatly increase, and naturally, I'll have a higher chance of sensing the whereabouts of the other pieces of golden paper. Ziyue pondered for a while, and quickly immersed himself in cultivation. 1, 2, 3 As if tireless, Ziyue continuously used the tracking spell. Soon, the entire room was filled with countless white dots. At the same time, his psychic power and spiritual power were rapidly consumed. When his spiritual energy was exhausted, or when his spiritual energy was insufficient, he would silently circulate the purple chi visualization technique to recover his spiritual energy. At the same time, the internal energy in his body would constantly circulate along a specific path in his meridians, tirelessly and without pause. Boom! Suddenly, as if he had broken through a barrier, Ziyue's body moved without wind, and a layer of pale golden light instantly swelled and appeared on the surface of his body. This layer of pale golden light was like a huge golden bell, enveloping his entire body, and a sense of majesty emerged from it. I've learned the golden bell shield to protect my body. I've also broken through to the first level. Ziyue's eyes couldn't help but reveal a hint of joy. As early as yesterday, after he had opened 2 of his mysterious meridians and broken through to the level of a second-rate master, he estimated that he would only need 1 day to learn the golden bell shield. Today it was indeed so. In less than a day, he had learned the golden bell shield. Furthermore, he also took the opportunity to cultivate this cultivation method to the first level, and released a protective golden bell. The golden bell shield to protect my body has a total of 9 levels. Even with the help of a first-rate master, after practicing for almost 20 years, I've only been able to reach the 7th level of this golden bell shield. You can imagine the difficulty of practicing it. Only the first level is really nothing. However, even so, this layer of the golden bell shield is enough to raise my life-saving ability to a new level. I estimate that even if a martial artist who has just entered the internal energy realm attacked with all his strength, it would be difficult to break this golden bell shield in a short period of time. Ziyue could easily sense the defensive strength of the golden bell shield outside his body. This golden bell shield, which was formed entirely from his internal energy, was fundamentally different from the internal energy body protection of an ordinary martial artist. Not only was its defensive ability far superior, it also did not affect the martial artist's ability to use other martial techniques to counterattack. It was really like a moving fort, able to attack and defend, and able to release and release at will. It's a pity that my spiritual energy is somewhat insufficient. Otherwise, I could use the spiritual energy to quickly improve this golden bell shield. Zeus silently glanced at the amount of spiritual energy he had. Although 8,000 spiritual energy was enough to upgrade the Golden Bell shield by one level, he had other uses for it, so he naturally did not dare to use it. Therefore, he could only put away his wild thoughts of completing the 9th level of the Golden Bell shield, and slowly withdrew the faint Golden Bell into his body. After 3 days of almost non-stop practice, I've finally learned the Golden Bell shield to the Golden Bell shield. Zeus reached out his hand and slightly refined the tracking mark on the table. He let out a long sigh of relief. In these 3 days, apart from the routine practice, he had spent most of his time on practicing the Golden Bell shield. Finally, the heavens did not disappoint those who persevered and allowed him to successfully learn the Golden Bell shield. Consumed 5315 spiritual energy to upgrade the Golden Bell shield to the Golden Bell shield. Upgrade. Without any hesitation, Zeus chose to upgrade this Golden Bell shield. Although this Golden Bell shield was mysterious, it was actually not much different from Zeus's spiritual eye technique. Therefore, the consumption of spiritual energy was not considered much. With more than 8,000 spiritual energy left, it was naturally enough to upgrade this Golden Bell shield to the Golden Bell shield. Buzz. In an instant, Zeus felt that his mind was filled with countless cultivation experiences related to the Golden Bell shield. The rune arrangement was also optimized and upgraded. Not only was it more delicate and agile, but it also allowed him to perform it more smoothly and quickly. At the same time, he even had a kind of enlightenment in his heart. It seemed that he already knew this Golden Bell shield like the back of his hand and had completely comprehended it. Zeus moved forward slightly as if he was blessed with good fortune. Chapter 216. In the blink of an eye, a dim white light shot out and landed on a swallow dozens of meters in the air. The swallow did not sense anything and quickly flew into the distance. It flew for a few thousand meters before landing on a roof. However, Zeus could still clearly sense it and did not let it escape his control. Magical instinct. Another spell has been raised to the level of spell instinct by me. Zeus quickly understood what had happened and was somewhat excited. Now, if I use the tracking spell to sense the 12 pieces of golden paper again, the range will be much larger. Zeus thought to himself as he took out the golden paper. In the blink of an eye, an extremely dim white light landed on a piece of golden paper. Then, he tapped on the tracking mark. In an instant, an invisible wave appeared. Just as he closed his eyes to sense it, Zeus suddenly turned around and looked in the southwest direction. He was extremely shocked. I can really sense it. The 8th and 9th pieces of golden paper are in the same place. He did not expect that the first time he used the tracking spell after raising it to magical instinct, he could clearly sense the whereabouts of the other 2 pieces of golden paper. This direction is the Scorching Sun Gang's headquarters. Zeus quickly came to a conclusion and came to a realization. He already knew that the map carved on the golden paper was the mountain river map of Wujiang County. Anyone who saw it would guess that the immortal Martial Treasure Vault was near Wujiang County. This was also why Elder Wu Dao, a cultivator of the immortal Dao, would appear in the desolate and remote Qinghe town, and why Elder Kuan Yuan, a peak 9th level Qi refinement cultivator who could break through to the Aperture Awakening realm at any time, would come to Wujiang County from Tianling County. Because of this, apart from those scattered outside, the only ones most likely to obtain the golden paper in Wujiang County were the various major factions within the county. The Scorching Sun Gang, as the largest gang in the area, was naturally one of them. If that's the case, it will be easy to find. However, there will definitely be a certain degree of difficulty in obtaining it. Zeus muttered to himself and stood up without hesitation. A few minutes later, Zeus appeared at the headquarters of the Scorching Sun Gang. Following the location of the 8th and 9th golden paper in his mind, Zeus directly appeared in the Internal Affairs Hall. Protector Bai. Protector Bai, you're here. When he arrived, the disciples of the Internal Affairs Hall quickly greeted him respectfully. As the protector of the Internal Affairs Division, his status naturally played a huge role here. Yes. Ziyue nodded, a strange look appearing in his eyes. He hadn't expected that the 8th and 9th pieces of golden paper would actually be in the treasury of the Internal Affairs Hall's backyard. Soon, he appeared in a heavily guarded courtyard. There was one guard every 5 steps and one guard every 10 steps. All of them were members of the Internal Affairs Division. Almost every one of them was at the level of internal refinement. Occasionally, there would be internal energy realm martial artists walking around. Internal energy realm martial artists weren't considered weak in the Scorching Sun Gang. With his status as a protector, Ziyue was similarly unimpeded in this heavily guarded place. Soon, his figure appeared in the courtyard. At this moment, there was a middle-aged man with a clean face and a goat-like beard sitting at the side. When he saw Ziyue step in, he raised his eyebrows in slight surprise. He stood up unhurriedly and said, "Qiuxiang, didn't you see that an esteemed guest has arrived? Hurry up and serve tea. Protector Bai, please take a seat. I don't know what kind of wind blew you here." Then, very quickly, a delicate voice sounded. A beautiful young girl wearing orange clothes who looked to be around 13 or 14 years old gracefully walked out of a room, bringing with her a gentle fragrance. She poured a cup of tea and handed it over. "Protector Chu, you're too polite." Ziyue thanked him and said, "I've come this time for personal matters." He naturally knew the identity of the middle-aged man with the goatee in front of him. He was a protector of the Internal Affairs Division like him. His surname was Chu. It was said that he had broken through to the internal energy realm for close to 10 years and had long reached the peak of the internal energy realm. However, what made the Internal Affairs Division members respect him was his identity as the gang leader's wife's brother. "I wonder what Protector Bai is here for? Coincidentally, I still have some contribution points on me, so I want to see if I can exchange them for 1 or 2 treasures. I wonder if Protector Chu can provide a list of treasures for me to choose from?" Ziyue thought for a moment and didn't hesitate as he directly asked. The list of treasures records the many treasures in the treasury. If it was someone else, naturally, it wouldn't be possible. However, since Protector Bai has spoken, I'll make an exception. Protector Chu smiled slightly and replied straightforwardly. He directly handed a book to Ziyue. Although his identity was different, he also knew that Ziyue was someone that the gang leader valued. If it was within his ability, he was naturally willing to express his goodwill. "If that's the case, then many thanks," Ziyue said and hurriedly flipped through the book impatiently. After skimming through many weapons, elixirs, and martial arts manuals, he soon found what he was looking for. 2 pieces of golden paper, hard material, engraved with a map of the Wujiang County's mountains and rivers. It's said to be the legendary map of the Immortal Martial Treasury. Requires 2,000 contribution points. Ziyue's heart trembled. He pretended to hesitate and said, "Protector Chu, what exactly is this golden paper? What is this Immortal Martial Treasury?" This golden paper is said to be something refined by someone who cultivates the immortal martial art. Its hardness is no less than diamond. As for the Immortal Martial Treasury, it's actually just a legend. No one knows whether it really exists or not. I advise Protector Bai not to waste your contribution points on this illusory place. With Protector Bai's current internal refinement level strength, it's more important to exchange for a few bottles of origin strengthening pills to strengthen your qi and blood and increase your internal refinement speed. I've heard that Protector Jiang has some objections to Protector Bai becoming a protector of the Internal Affairs Division with your mere internal refinement level strength. Protector Chu explained and then tried to persuade him out of goodwill. "Thank you for dispelling my doubts, Protector Chu. Ziue expressed his thanks and immediately pretended to be pleasantly surprised. However, he quickly restrained himself, as if he was purposely hiding something. He then said, however, I'm truly rather interested in items related to the immortal martial arts. I might as well not be picky and directly exchange for these 2 pieces of golden paper. In addition, I just so happen to have some contribution points left. I'll do as Protector Chu said and exchange the remaining 300 or so points for some origin-strengthening pills. This kind of feigned concealment naturally couldn't escape Protector Chu's eyes. He knew that young geniuses like Ziue often had a kind of pretentious arrogance in their hearts. They believed that if others couldn't obtain something, they would definitely be able to obtain it. This was especially true for items that appeared to be fated opportunities. Their hearts burned with passion and they were determined to obtain them. At this time, Ziue definitely wouldn't listen to the slightest bit of advice from others. Naturally, he wouldn't play the good guy in vain. He took advantage of the situation and said, Since Protector Bai has already made up your mind, I won't try to persuade you any further. In the future, if Protector Bai regrets his decision, you can still return these 2 pieces of golden paper. The gang is still willing to buy them back for 500 contribution points each. Then I thank Protector Chu. Ziue's face revealed a hesitant expression, but his heart was secretly relieved. It seemed that his clumsy performance had finally worked. 10 minutes later, Ziue calmly walked out of the entrance of the Scorching Sun Gang's headquarters. It wasn't until he was a full 300 meters away from the Scorching Sun Gang's headquarters that he couldn't help but reveal a trace of joy on his face. Now I have a total of 9 pieces of golden paper in my hands. There are only 3 pieces left to gather all 12 pieces of golden paper. Feeling the texture of the golden paper in his arms, Ziue's heart was also at ease. Originally, he wasn't very confident that he could gather all 12 pieces of golden paper. However, when he gathered a total of 9 pieces of golden paper on his body, his confidence began to soar. There are still 3 pieces left. I'll continue to use the tracking technique to find them. Even if I can't get them in a short period of time, I have to confirm the location of these pieces of golden paper. Bai Ziue turned around and began to search the entire Wujiang County. He began to sense. Not far from the Scorching Sun Gang's headquarters was Wujiang Avenue, where the Wujiang County's government was located. The moment he set foot on Wujiang Avenue, a bright light flashed in his eyes. Another piece of golden paper. But this time, it'll be a little difficult. It won't be that easy to get the golden paper from the government. Ziue approached the government's main gate and looked into the depths of the building. He pondered for a long time, but didn't act rashly. After secretly noting down the whereabouts of the 10th piece of golden paper, Ziue left. Soon, Ziue began to survey the entire Wujiang County. The first street, the second street, the third street. After walking through almost the entire Wujiang County, Ziue still couldn't sense the whereabouts of the 11th piece of golden paper. His face couldn't help but reveal a trace of seriousness. There's probably none left in Wujiang County. As for outside the city, Ziue pondered for a moment, then his eyes suddenly lit up. He thought of the Nine Seals sect. As a major sect that could contend with the Scorching Sun Gang, it was very likely that they had the golden paper from the immortal martial treasury. If even the Nine Seals sect doesn't have the golden paper, then the chances of other places having it are much lower. It's very difficult to find it in the vast Sky Spirit County. Ziue's heart was filled with anticipation, but more than that, there was some apprehension. Since it was still early, he didn't hesitate and went directly to the north of the city, stepping out of the city gate. The Nine Seals sect's encampment was on Mount Yuhua, 10 miles north of Wujiang County. After the great battle with the Scorching Sun Gang, the Nine Seals sect's influence in Wujiang County was almost completely uprooted. Everyone from the Nine Seals sect had retreated to Mount Yuhua. As for the foot of Mount Yuhua, It was now sealed off by the Scorching Sun Gang, preventing anyone from entering or leaving. As a disciple of the Scorching Sun Gang and a guardian of the Internal Affairs Hall, Ziyue was naturally not restricted. Therefore, he approached the mountain gate of the Nine Seals sect with ease. In the distance, he even saw the figures of the Nine Seals sect's disciples patrolling nervously. Are the 11th and 12th pieces of golden paper in the Nine Seals sect? Ziyue thought to himself as he began to sense. Chapter 217. Found it. By Ziyue's eyes suddenly flickered with excitement. But it seems like there's only one? Immediately after, his heart sank. Just as he was feeling a little anxious, a vague feeling appeared and slowly approached his perception. The 12th piece has appeared. However, looking at the situation, it seemed to be on someone's body. The reason why I didn't sense it at first was because the person was still outside my range of perception. Now, it's obvious that the person with the 12th piece of golden paper has entered my range of perception. Ziyue muttered in his heart, feeling a little excited. He really didn't expect that he would find the whereabouts of all 12 pieces of golden paper so quickly. With this, his chances of gathering all 12 pieces of golden paper and finding the so-called immortal Martial Treasure Vault had increased exponentially. Now, what I need to think about is how to get the remaining 3 pieces of golden paper. The one from the government might be a little tricky, but the 2 from the Nine Seal sect are not impossible to get. Everything will depend on tomorrow. Ziyue thought to himself. Then, he turned around and left. Tomorrow was the day when the leader of the Scorching Sun Gang, Sky Blade Jiangtao, and the leader of the Nine Seal sect had agreed to fight. The location was at the foot of the mountain of the Nine Seal sect. The next day, when the sun had just risen, at the foot of Mount Yuhua, 10 miles outside of the city, there were already countless martial artists in martial arts attire, armed with swords and sabers. Most of them were the disciples of the Scorching Sun Gang. Of course, there were also some martial artists who had heard of it and came because of its reputation. There were quite a lot of people in this group, and there was no lack of second-rate experts. Ziyue stood among the disciples of the Scorching Sun Gang. His face was calm, but there was a hint of anticipation in his eyes. Behind him were his 2 subordinates, Pei Tuzi and Wu Ma. Wu Ma had not fully recovered from her injuries, but to martial artists like them, a battle between 2 first-rate experts was a grand occasion that they did not want to miss. Therefore, they insisted on coming. All of a sudden, the Nine Seals sect's mountain gate opened wide. A group of Nine Seal sect's disciples, numbering in the hundreds, rushed down quickly and scattered in all directions, forming a stalemate with the Scorching Sun Gang. In the middle, there was a distance of about 100 meters. Nine Seal sect's Supreme Elder Gu Mingyu, Nine Seal sect's Great Elder Hu Yuntian, Second Elder Lu Fangfang, Discipline Hall's Hall Master Situming, Internal Service Hall's Hall Master Zhao Dashi. This time, the Nine Seal sect has turned out in full force. That's to be expected. The Scorching Sun Gang has already come to the mountain gate. If the Nine Seals sect still doesn't make a move, wouldn't they be digging their own grave? But, by the looks of it, the Nine Seals sect had lost quite a number of people. The Hall Master of the Battle Hall, Yu Yong, Elder Guiyun, Qian Wuyue, and Lu Qianchong of the Foreign Affairs Hall, who were said to have reached the level of second-rate experts, did not appear either. He's not dead, is he? Before this, there were many conflicts between the 2 gangs. These people are either heavily injured or dead. Who knows? It's not just the Nine Seals sect. Look at the Scorching Sun Gang. There are also many experts who have appeared. Great Elder Su Changchun, Scorching Sun Gang's Elder Gong Changxing, Kong Mingyu and Ye Yunhao. Out of the other 7 Hall Masters, 5 of them have appeared this time. Also, look at those 3 unfamiliar faces. They are actually the leaders of the 3 major divisions of the Scorching Sun Gang. Each of them has the strength of a third-rate expert. They have come this time as well. It seems that the Scorching Sun Gang is very ambitious this time. Not only do they want to fight it out and defeat the 9 Seals sect's leader, the Scorching Sun Gang itself wants to go all the way up the mountain and destroy the 9 Seals sect. This is also very normal. Both sides have long been in a state of irreconcilable hatred. At the end of the day, the 9 Seals sect is still too hasty. With their momentum, if they could wait for a few years, they might still have a chance of winning. But now, not to mention the number of disciples that the Scorching Sun Gang has, even the level of experts is inferior to the Scorching Sun Gang. How can they win? In my opinion, the 9 Seals sect will not be able to escape destruction. Isn't this good? If the 9 Seals sect is not destroyed, how can we have a chance? When the 2 forces are almost done fighting, we will go up. The 9 Seals sect has been established for nearly 100 years. It is said that the previous leader had some inheritance from the Celestial Martial sect. The 9 Seals palm is said to be a simplified version of the Celestial Martial sect's Celestial Martial palm. Their foundation must be strong. Taking advantage of the chaos, with our methods we will be able to get some meat. That's right. In the hustle and bustle, all kinds of discussions were incessant. There were those who came purely to broaden their horizons. Naturally, there were also those who had ulterior motives and were secretly scheming. In the hustle and bustle, even the Scorching Sun could not suppress their fiery emotions. The leader of the Scorching Sun Gang has arrived. The leader of the 9 Seals sect has come down the mountain. Suddenly, a series of exclamations were heard. Then, in the direction of the city gate, the leader of the Scorching Sun Gang was seen riding a tall horse, followed by several of his subordinates. They were rapidly approaching the scene. On the other side, on the peak of Mount Yuhua, a middle-aged man in white was using his lightness skill to glide down the mountain. His figure was indescribably elegant. The leader of the Scorching Sun Gang, Jiang Tao. The leader of the 9 Seals sect, Zhua Qingyang. The 2 men appeared almost at the same time. Then, they appeared at the forefront of the 2 forces at once. Soon, they stopped 30 meters away from each other. In an instant, everyone at the scene was in an uproar. Countless people looked at the 2 men with fervent and admiring gazes. Whether it was Sky Blade Jiang Tao or 9 Seals Palm Zhua Qingyang, they were both rare first-class experts in the entire Wujiang County. It was said that in the entire Wujiang County, apart from Mr. Yang Zhen, who was in charge of the government, only the 2 of them had reached this level. It would not be an exaggeration to say that this battle was a battle of the pinnacle. The outcome of this battle would determine the fate of the 2 forces in the future. Zhua Qingyang, who was dressed in white, looked like a grandmaster. He looked at Jiang Tao and said in an indifferent voice, "Long time no see, brother Jiang." "Yes, the last time we met was when we fought. It has been 3 years since then." Jiang Tao, who was dressed in a lavender robe, had an air of nobility about him. At this moment, he responded with a hint of emotion in his voice. 3 years and 5 months, Zhua Qingyang replied. "You remember it well," Jiang Tao said with a surprised expression on his face. "As the winner, I naturally have the right to forget my achievements. But as the loser, if I don't even want to face my failure, remember it, and savor it, how can I have the confidence to face you again, brother Jiang?" Zhua Qingyang smiled. A trace of fighting spirit suddenly appeared in his eyes. He said, "Come on. Today, let's put aside our grudges and fight to our heart's content. Let's see if I've made more progress in the past 3 years, or if brother Jiang is stronger." As he spoke, his energy suddenly surged. A stream of qi and blood as thick as smoke was released, twisting the air. He paused, and the ground seemed to turn over like an earth dragon. Everything within a radius of several meters exploded. Then, he charged forward like a raging rhinoceros, rash and crazy as he rapidly approached Jiang Tao. Boom! The moment he was about 10 meters away from Jiang Tao, Sui Qingyang's jade white palm seemed to contain countless mysterious powers. It was astonishing. 9 Seals palm. He used his ultimate move as soon as he made a move. There was no preparation at all. He raised one hand to the sky and stretched it out abruptly. His majestic and scorching internal force surged rapidly. As the air swirled, a giant palm print made entirely of internal force was formed in the void. It was as if the Milky Way was flowing backward and pressing down. The 8th move of the 9 Seals palm. Infinite Vajra. As you wish. Jiang Tao let out a long cry. With a clang, a long saber instantly made a violent noise. 7 Styles of the Sky Saber. A beam of saber light, about 10 meters long, shot out from the saber and slashed at the palm print like a mountain rising from the ground. Boom! The moment the saber light and the palm print collided, a tremendous force spread out like a rolling river. It crashed into the stone wall and kicked up a storm of sand dozens of meters away. Sui Qingyang grunted and blood oozed out of his mouth. As his hand trembled slightly, an obvious mark of a saber appeared on it. Through the mark, one could vaguely see threads being cut open. It was only then that people noticed that he was wearing a glove. This glove was tightly fitted to his palm. It was almost no different from an ordinary palm, making it difficult for others to tell it apart. No wonder it's a glove made of Skyheart Jade Cicada silk. In terms of value, it's even more valuable than my Kongming saber. Jiang Tao guffawed, and a look of amazement flashed across his eyes. Skyheart Jade Cicada silk was a spiritual object of heaven and earth. The silk it spat out was extremely tough and hard to be cut by weapons. It was highly valued by many people in the Jianghu, and even those who practiced the way of immortality. Jiang Tao wasn't the only one who was amazed. Even the spectators were amazed by it. Again! Sui Qingyang bellowed. Ignoring Jiang Tao's amazement, he put his palms together and crossed them. Then, he leaped into the air, and a palm print as big as a mountain came crashing down. It was the 9th strike of the 9 seal palms. The 9 heavens of Mount Sumeru. It's useless. Jiang Tao chuckled. Streaks of fiery red light suddenly burst out of the Kongming saber. Almost in an instant, the fiery red light burned the blade until it was completely red. 7 Styles of the Sky Saber, against all odds. He swung his saber. The saber light that burst out of the saber was 15 meters long. The fiery red saber light swept out like rolling clouds of fire. Boom! The saber and the palm print collided with each other. Boom! With a loud crash, a figure was swept away by the endless blast of air. He was sent flying like a rag and landed hard on the ground. He spat out a mouthful of blood, which almost turned into a bloody mist. Sect leader, many people from the 9 Seal sect cried out in surprise. Defeated! Their sect leader had really been defeated. A sense of despair instantly appeared on the faces of almost everyone from the 9 Seals sect. On the other hand, the Scorching Sun Triad cheered loudly at this moment. However, Ziyue's expression suddenly froze. Chapter 218. The outcome of this battle was well within our expectations. 3 years ago, the leader of the Scorching Sun Gang was able to crush Sui Qingyang. Now that 3 years have passed, even if Sui Qingyang's strength has improved, Jiang Tao will too. It's only normal that he's defeated. It's unusual that he's won. So, the Scorching Sun Gang has won the battle between the Scorching Sun Gang and the 9 Seal sect? Not necessarily. If they didn't have a certain level of confidence, the 9 Seal sect would have moved out of Wujiang County when they were driven out. Why wait until now? Obviously, although the leader of the 9 Seal sect has been defeated, they still have a trump card. This trump card should be the key to the victory of these two forces. The moment Sui Qingyang was sent flying by the 2 saber strikes, the crowd was abuzz with discussion. The scorching sun gang cheered and stared at the figure in front of them with fanatical admiration. Only Bai Ziue's expression changed slightly at that instant. In fact, before the battle between Jiang Tao and Zhuo Qingyang, the leader of the Nine Seal sect, Ziyue had been sensing the situation of the other two pieces of golden paper. One of them had been motionless and had remained in a certain position. However, the other piece of golden paper had quietly moved the moment the leader of the Nine Seal sect, Zhuo Qingyang, had been defeated. Then, Ziyue's gaze pierced through it and landed on the mountain gate of the Nine Seal sect. He happened to see a figure silently descending the mountain. It's him. Bai Ziyue's pupils constricted as he recognized the identity of this figure. It was one of the D family practitioners he had met in the Foggy Valley more than half a month ago. Moreover, he was the most powerful one among them at the time, at the 9th level of the Qi refinement realm. The golden paper is in his hands? That's going to be tricky. Wait, what's he trying to do by descending the mountain at this time? As these thoughts flashed through Ziyue's mind, his heart sank. Unless it was absolutely necessary, he would never want to face this D family practitioner at the 9th level of the Qi refinement realm. Existences at this level were too powerful and had many tricks up their sleeve. In truth, he did not have much confidence in defeating them. However, even if he didn't say that he was determined to get the golden paper, it was more or less the case. Moreover, if he guessed correctly, the other party's target was most likely the leader of the Scorching Sun Gang. Immediately, his gaze turned to the high-spirited faction leader in the middle of the battlefield. Would the sect master, a top-notch expert, be a match for this D family cultivator, who was at the 9th level of the Qi refinement realm? You win. In terms of martial arts, I really am not your match. Zhuo Qingyang heaved a long sigh, and there was indescribable loneliness in his voice. After 3 years of bitter training, he believed that his strength had greatly improved. But in the end, he was still unable to defeat Jiang Tao. The unwillingness in his heart turned into a sigh. However, our Nine Seals sect has yet to lose the battle with the Scorching Sun Gang. As soon as he said that, Zhuo Qingyang flicked his wrist. Instantly, more than a dozen pitch-black balls shot out from his palm. For the sake of victory, he was willing to let go of the Jianghu principles. How dare you? Jiang Tao's face fell. His long saber swept out swiftly. Beams of saber light shot out from his saber like lightning. Boom, boom, boom. The moment the saber light landed on some of the balls, there were thunderous booms. The saber light shattered under the violent roar of the thunderstorm. There were even 3 or 4 beads that rolled to Jiang Tao's side. Alarmed, Jiang Tao hurriedly leaped up. The scorching sun skill in his body turned into liquid mercury and surged through his body. In an instant, he activated his protective technique, the Golden Bell Shield. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Layers upon layers of golden bells appeared, towering and imposing. There were a total of 7 layers, which enveloped his entire body. Boom, boom, boom. Thunderous booms rang out. The violent, explosive force blasted the ground several meters deep. The golden bell shield on Jiang Tao's body also shattered under the violent, thunderous attack. 6 layers of the golden bell shield had been blasted away. In the end, there was only 1 layer of the golden bell shield, which firmly protected his entire body. Disciples of the Nine Seal sect, kill him. Just then, Zhuo Qingyang charged at Jiang Tao ferociously, blood trickling down the corner of his mouth. His hair was disheveled, and he seemed to be in a sorry state. Raising one hand, he formed a giant palm print and slammed it down. Die! He wanted to kill him while he was down. He had grasped the perfect timing. Humph! I knew you wouldn't let this go so easily. At this moment, Jiang Tao's face had calmed down. As he spoke in a menacing tone, an extremely dazzling saber light suddenly condensed in the void. This saber strike? Zhuo Qingyang was so frightened that his voice changed. There was even a trace of fear in the depths of his eyes. He suddenly sensed something different about this saber strike. Unexpectedly, this saber strike contained a terrifying momentum. It was as if all the people in the world would be killed by this surging saber light. Saber momentum? At this moment, he suddenly came to a realization. This was saber momentum. It was a saber momentum that contained a martial artist's spiritual will. He had never expected Jiang Tao to be able to use saber momentum. Although it was still somewhat imperfect, it had already surpassed Jiang Tao's level by too much. He couldn't block it. He knew that he wouldn't be able to block this saber strike. Once it hit him, he would die without a doubt. Senior, help! Zhuo Qingyang cried out frantically without hesitation. He knew that the senior of the D family must be on the battlefield. In the face of death, he couldn't care less. He cried for help in front of countless martial artists. Trash! At the same time, a green sword of light shot out without a sound. In the blink of an eye, it was close to Jiang Tao's back. At this moment, if Jiang Tao killed Zhuo Qingyang with this saber strike, this small sword would definitely pierce through Jiang Tao in an instant. That would be the case even if he still had the golden bell shield protecting him. However, at this critical moment, the strike that the D family cultivator had been so sure of failed. A pitch-black ball shot out at almost the same speed as the green lightsaber. The moment it touched the green lightsaber, boom! There was a clap of thunder, accompanied by a scorching aura of fire. Following this thunderous explosion, the green lightsaber paused for a moment, then changed direction and shot past Jiang Tao 2 meters away. At this critical moment, it was Ziyue who made his move. From beginning to end, he had only been paying attention to the D family cultivator. Therefore, before the others had charged at Zhuo Qingyang's summons, Di Jiu had already rushed out and quickly approached the leader of the Scorching Sun Gang. That was why he was able to make his move in time. Fire thunder bead? The D family cultivator's expression changed. Of course, he recognized the name of this black bead. It's you? Does this mean that Dao was killed by you? Almost at the same time, the D family cultivator recognized Ziyue's identity. Even though they had only met face to face back then, cultivators of the immortal Tao all had strong mental strength and a deep memory. Naturally, they would not be mistaken. If you say so, then so be it. As soon as Ziyue finished speaking, an extremely terrified scream was heard. Zhuo Qingyang, the sect master of the Nine Seals sect and a top-notch expert, was almost cut in half. His aura weakened and finally, he fell into a dead silence. He was dead. Without the help of the D family's cultivators, he had no way of resisting Jiang Tao's powerful saber aura and had been killed immediately. You're from the D family? At this time, Jiang Tao turned around and looked at this person with a grave expression. Then, he looked at Ziyue and said with a wry smile, "When Li Jubo and Lord Pei of the Immortal Ascension Pavilion spoke up for you, I already had my suspicions. Sure enough, I was right. You're also a cultivator of the Immortal Tao. But at the same time, I'm also a member of the Scorching Sun Gang," Ziyue said calmly. In fact, he had already expected his identity to be exposed. When the sect master had summoned him and deliberately pointed that out, he knew that the sect master must have figured out his identity. At this moment, this was merely proof of this point. You're indeed a good-for-nothing. The D family cultivator cursed at Zhuo Qingyang. Then, he looked coldly at Jiang Tao and said coldly, "You were just lucky the first time. You won't be so lucky next time." As for Bai Ziyue, he was completely ignored by him. Even though Ziyue was also a cultivator of the immortal Tao like him, Ziyue was too weak. However, in his opinion, his strength was too weak and could not attract any attention at all. Die. As the D family cultivator spoke, the green flying sword soared into the sky again. It turned into a bolt of lightning and shot toward Jiang Tao. The sword was as swift as lightning. In the blink of an eye, it was in front of Jiang Tao. 7 styles of the sky saber. Jiang Tao's heart pounded wildly. With a roar, the long saber swept out like a raging river and slashed down rapidly. Clang! There was an earth-shattering sound. He blocked it? Jiang Tao's figure abruptly took a step back. The green flying sword also paused for a moment before shooting out once again. His expression changed drastically. Layers of the golden bell appeared in a flash. Boom! 5 layers of the golden bell were shattered in an instant. However, at this moment, the green flying sword also lost its power and was sent flying back. At the same time, Ziyue made his move. He reached into his inner pocket and a stack of talismans appeared in his hand. Without any hesitation, he activated the talismans at once. In the blink of an eye, dark clouds filled the sky and the world darkened. Boom! 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 Bolts of lightning swept down from the sky and shot toward the D family cultivators. Countless bolts of lightning struck down, as if they were truly earth-shattering. The huge commotion caused almost everyone at the scene to be moved. They stared in shock and fear at the dense layers of dark clouds and the flashing lightning in the dark clouds. Chapter 219. If I'm not mistaken, the 9 seal sex trump card is this old man in blue. Controlling the sword to kill the enemy is an immortal technique. This old man in blue is a practitioner of immortal techniques and must be very powerful. It's a pity that Zhuo Qingyang, the head of the 9 Seals sect, was killed before the old man could turn the tide. Who's that? Is there such an expert in the Scorching Sun gang? Hold on, what did he throw out? Hiss, summoning the wind, summoning the rain, and controlling lightning. That's also an immortal technique. Is there someone in the Scorching Sun gang who cultivates immortal techniques? Who is he? The battle between Jiang Tao and Zhuo Qingyang, 2 first-rate experts, had already attracted a lot of attention. Even though the battle between the Scorching Sun gang and the 9 Seal sect had broken out, most people's attention was still focused on the 2 combatants in the center of the battlefield. The sudden changes in the battle between the 2 first-rate experts and the sudden appearance of the small green sword naturally caused many people to cry out in surprise. However, when the endless thunder and lightning gathered in the air and flashed across the sky, everyone was even more shocked. Compared to the soundless use of the sword to kill the enemy, this method of changing the weather and descending thunder and lightning shocked them even more. Heavenly might. Divine punishment. That was all there was to it. For ordinary people, and even martial artists, this kind of method naturally made them feel reverence. What talisman is this? Why is it so powerful? The D family cultivator's expression changed drastically. Before the thunder and lightning gathered, he hurriedly threw out a piece of cloth the size of a handkerchief. Buzz! The piece of cloth expanded in the wind and instantly turned into a huge blanket, covering him. Boom! 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 Thunder and lightning crisscrossed, fast to the extreme, rapidly descending. Light flowed from the blanket and it trembled as the thunder and lightning fell. However, the blanket's defensive power seemed to be extremely strong. Even after the continuous lightning strikes, it was still unable to break through. Sure enough, the Thunderfall Technique Conversion Talisman is too much for a 9th stage Qi Refinement Realm cultivator like the D family. Zira let out a sigh and flipped his hand, causing another stack of talismans to appear in his hand. This battle had attracted the attention of too many people. Not only were there martial artists, there were also many cultivators, such as Xie Tsang, Zhang Xianshi, Li Hun from the government, Pei Yuanwu from the Immortal Ascension Pavilion. They were all paying attention. Ziyue was well aware of this. These people might not know everything about him, but it wouldn't be difficult for them to find out. Thus, if he didn't want to attract unnecessary trouble, then he had to conceal himself, and couldn't reveal a cultivation level that was too powerful. However, even if I don't reveal my strength, it would not be impossible for me to deal with this D family cultivator. If 5 talismans aren't enough, then I'll take out 10 or 20. I don't believe he can withstand it. A ruthless look flashed across Ziyue's eyes, but his hands didn't stop moving. In an instant, he activated another 5 Thunder Fall technique conversion talismans. Whoosh! The dark clouds became even denser. The crisscrossing lightning slightly brewed and shot out again. Boom! 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 The continuous lightning strikes struck the blanket again, causing it to tremble violently. The sparkling spiritual light finally began to dim. The D family cultivator's expression changed greatly. He hurriedly waved his small green sword and shot it out. This time, his target was Ziyue. If he allowed Ziyue to continuously activate the lightning talismans, he was afraid that his azure light spiritual avoidance blanket wouldn't be able to withstand it. However, his sword was destined to return empty-handed. Do you really think I'm superfluous? As a first-rate expert, how many battles had Jiang Tao experienced? He had even fought with people who cultivated immortal techniques once or twice. Naturally, he wouldn't allow the other party to act recklessly and pose a threat to Ziyue. He knew that the real threat to the D family cultivator was the talismans in Ziyue's hands. As soon as he finished speaking, a resplendent and eye-catching saber glow that was at least 5 zhang long appeared. It contained an extraordinary aura that seemed to be able to slaughter everyone in its path. It turned into a silver waterfall and slashed down. Boom! The saber light ruthlessly struck the small green sword that was thrusting toward Ziyue. Clang! The small green sword trembled violently and tumbled a few times before it finally stabilized in the void. However, at this moment, Jiang Tao's figure had already rushed in front of the small green sword. Endless saber light swept out and continuously struck the small green sword. Jiang Tao, who was at the level of a first-rate expert, might not be able to compete with people who cultivated immortal techniques at the same level. However, once he found the right opportunity, the speed of his saber was far faster than the speed of ordinary people who cultivated immortal techniques. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Ziyue casually shook his hand and activated 5 more talismans. How can there be so many? Don't the talismans cost money? The D family cultivator's face completely changed and his voice became hoarse. He hurriedly stretched out his hand and summoned back his small green sword. Then, in an instant, he threw out more than 10 black beads and turned around to escape without hesitation. At this moment, he was really a little scared. The power of Ziyue's Thunder Fall transformation talisman wasn't weak. Each talisman was at least equivalent to the full force attack of a person who cultivated immortal techniques at the 7th level of the Qi refinement realm. He might be able to resist for a short period of time, but if the talismans were activated one after another, no matter how many tricks he had, he wouldn't dare to stay any longer. He didn't want to become a high-level cultivator who was tortured to death by talismans by people who cultivated immortal techniques at a lower level. Boom! 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 Out of the 10 fire thunder beads, 5 or 6 of them rushed toward Ziyue, Jiang Tao, and the others. However, most of them shot toward the dark clouds and lightning in the sky. The Azure Light Spiritual Avoidance Carpet was a high-level Dharma artifact, so he naturally couldn't bear to give it up. Therefore, he wanted to use the power of the fire thunder beads to cause chaos in the lightning in the sky so that he could recall the Azure Light Spiritual Avoidance Carpet. However, want to escape? It's too late, Ziyue sneered. As he dodged the attacks of the fire thunder beads, he immediately glanced at his attribute panel. He knew that it would be extremely difficult to prevent a D family cultivator at the 9th level of the Qi refinement realm from escaping with ordinary means. Unless he revealed his immortal techniques at the 7th level of the Qi refinement realm and used the perfected Thunder Fall technique. Therefore, almost immediately, his gaze fell on the spiritual attack Dharma art. Compared to the many thousand mountains ice blade technique and the thunder fall technique, this Dharma art didn't cause much of a commotion. It could even be done silently. Even if it was used, ordinary people wouldn't be able to detect it. In his opinion, this was the most suitable time to use it. Therefore, he didn't hesitate any longer. Spend 10,354 points of soul power to upgrade the frightening spirit spike to the perfected level. Upgrade. In an instant, Ziyue felt waves of coolness in his head. His mind power increased rapidly, as if there was no end to it. The entire world seemed to have changed in his perception. At the same time, the rune arrangement and structure of the frightening spirit spike in his mind underwent a huge change and optimization. His understanding of this Dharma art also reached the limit of what he could improve. The last trip to the Fog Valley, by Ziyue's gains, could be said to be enormous. The frightening spirit spike Dharma art was also one of his gains. For almost half a month, he had put a lot of effort into cultivating his protective cultivation technique and the tracking technique. However, he hadn't given up on cultivating other Dharma arts either. Naturally, this included the frightening spirit spike. A few days ago, he had cultivated this Dharma art to the beginner level. As for the amount of his soul power, Sui Qingyang's death alone had increased his soul power by more than 9,000 points. In addition, he was in the middle of a battle between the Scorching Sun Gang and the Nine Seals sect. People were dying almost every second. Naturally, his soul power had increased tremendously. In a short time, his soul power had increased to more than 40,000 points. In order to keep this D family cultivator here, he was naturally willing to spend more than 10,000 points of soul power. In an instant, Ziyue opened his eyes. Almost in the blink of an eye, he executed the frightening spirit spike. At the same time, he pretended to reach into his bosom with one hand. A black bead immediately appeared. It was the mind fixation bead that he had obtained from the D family cultivator, who was at the 7th level of the Qi refinement realm. With the help of this mind fixation bead, he could amplify his mind power attacks to a certain extent. Together with the frightening spirit spike, this Dharma art could be further enhanced. Buzz. A strong wave of mind energy rushed out of Ziyue's mind. Then, the composure bead vibrated and emitted rays of black light, completely combining with his frightening spirit spike Dharma art. Without a sound, but at an extremely fast speed, it sank into the head of the D family cultivator, who had just summoned back the blue light spirit avoiding carpet and was about to flee. Swish! Swish! An extremely terrified scream rang out. It was as if a needle had pierced between his eyebrows. The D family cultivator's mind went blank and his consciousness began to fade. Then, like a scallion, he fell straight to the ground and couldn't get up for a long time. The perfected frightening spirit spike is indeed powerful. Moreover, this is because my mental power isn't strong enough. If my mental power was twice as strong as it is now, this Dharma art would have been able to kill it. Just by using this Dharma art, it would have been enough to wipe out the consciousness of this 9th stage Qi refinement cultivator. Ziyue's eyes flashed. He was very satisfied with the power of this Dharma art. Spending more than 10,000 points of soul power to upgrade it was not in vain. Then, without hesitation, he took out several talismans and activated them. Buzz! The dark clouds that had been gradually dispersing suddenly gathered again. Between the dark clouds, thunder and lightning crisscrossed. Suddenly, the void turned white. The thunder clouds rolled. Whoosh! Boom! 1, 2, 3 countless thunder and lightning bolts struck down. After a full 2 breaths, the D family cultivator finally came back to his senses. As if he had thought of something, he hurriedly raised his head and his expression changed drastically. Chapter 220. Boom! Just then, a bolt of lightning struck him with a loud explosion. He hurriedly put up a defensive spiritual light, but it was immediately shattered by the lightning and dissipated. Boom! Then, a second bolt, a third bolt, countless bolts of lightning fell like a rolling river. The D family cultivator let out a blood-curdling scream before he was drowned by the countless bolts of lightning. Soon, the lightning stopped and the dark clouds that had gathered in the void dispersed, allowing the scorching sun to shine down. Spiritual Energy Plus 9752. Without hesitation, Baizua shot out like a wisp of green smoke and scurried to the charred corpse of the D family cultivator. Then, he started to search the corpse quickly. The immortal master is dead. A cry of surprise quickly rang out on the battlefield. Instantly, the 9 SEAL sect members, who had lost their morale due to the death of their sect leader, lost their will to resist and were quickly defeated. Many of them took the opportunity to escape from the mountain gate of the 9 SEAL sect. Many of them even returned to the mountain gate of the 9 SEAL sect and quickly fled. Kill. Leave no one alive. This was a battle of sect annihilation. One of the 2 major forces would be completely destroyed. Therefore, Jiang Tao shouted and immediately rushed toward the 9 SEAL sect's great elder, Hu Yuntian. The one fighting him was the Scorching Sun Gang's elder, Kong Mingyu. Kong Mingyu's strength was not weak. He was a second-rate expert who had unblocked 2 extraordinary meridians. However, compared to Hu Yuntian, who had unblocked 6 extraordinary meridians, Kong Mingyu was a far cry. He was completely at a disadvantage and was in a perilous situation. With a loud thud, the Scorching Sun Gang's great elder, Su Changchun's double hammer struck the head of a 9 SEAL sect's hall master. In an instant, the skull shattered and red and white matter scattered everywhere. The 9 SEAL sect's hall master died before he could make a sound. Just at this moment, a 2-meter-long spear pierced out silently like a snake. Then, just as it was about to descend on the body of a hall leader of the Scorching Sun Gang's External Affairs Hall, it suddenly exploded. It was as vicious as a flood dragon. Vaguely, a sound similar to a dragon's roar could be heard. 8 strikes of the snake and dragon. The Foreign Affairs Hall Master's expression changed greatly. His silver spear pierced out, but the moment it touched the spear, it was deflected. The spear then shot out like a python and pierced his chest at an extremely fast speed. Kill. At this moment, the entire foot of Mount Yuhua was in chaos. The sounds of killing could be heard in every corner. The once magnificent mountain gate of the 9 SEALs sect had now turned into a battlefield. Blood stained the ground and broken weapons were scattered everywhere. It was a scene of devastation. Countless figures were fighting here. All of them looked as ferocious as jackals and wolves. Their eyes were filled with a bloodthirsty glint as they smiled sinisterly and charged at their opponents. Let's go. Whether we can make a fortune or not depends on this. At the foot of the mountain, many figures rushed from the direction of the battlefield to the peak of the 9 SEALs sect. The eyes of these figures were filled with excitement, as if they were looking forward to something. They were the martial practitioners who had been watching from the periphery of the battlefield. The 9 SEALs sect had been established for 100 years and had been passed down for generations. How much wealth did they have? Especially the martial arts manuals and inner strength mantras. To countless martial practitioners who did not have any inheritance, it was a fatal temptation. Under the leadership of 1 or 2 second-rated experts and 4 or 5 third-rated experts, more martial practitioners rushed up Mount Yuhua. 66 green light swords, a high-level Dharma artifact. 69 green light carpets, a defensive Dharma artifact. 45 bronze bells, a defensive Dharma artifact. It's a pity that these spells were more or less damaged by the violent bombardment of the thunder elixir. Some of the spiritual stones and other items were directly smashed into powder. Ziua found some items from the D family cultivators one by one. He could not help but look regretful. After all, there were very few items that could withstand the lightning attack without being damaged. However, at least this golden paper is intact. Now, the number of golden papers I have has reached 10. There are only 2 left, and they are wandering outside. Ziyue took out a piece of hard golden paper from the D family cultivator's chest. He could not help but feel delighted. Just this golden paper alone was enough to offset the many Thunder Fall transformation talismans that he had activated earlier. Next, Ziyue's gaze immediately turned to the mountain gate of the Nine Seals sect, on the peak of Mount Yuhua. He could sense that the 11th piece of golden paper was still at a certain spot on the mountaintop, not moving at all. Without any hesitation, Bai Ziyue charged forward together with the other disciples of the sect. The amount of spiritual energy on the attribute panel increased rapidly as the two forces fought. Plus 642, plus 455, plus 7624, plus 228, plus 4,924. The deaths of martial practitioners of various levels caused Ziyue's spiritual energy to increase tremendously. As time passed, the sounds of battle began to die down. In order to obtain as much spiritual energy as possible, Ziyue had been pacing back and forth in the midst of the fierce battle. Even though he hadn't displayed any techniques above the inner force realm, perhaps because he had participated in the encirclement of the D family's cultivator and continuously activated the talisman, it had been too shocking. Thus, no cultivator above the inner force realm had dared to provoke him. Unknowingly, Ziyue had followed the other disciples and charged into the mountain gate of the Nine Seals sect. When he arrived, the scene became even more chaotic. Countless people entered and exited the various rooms and lofts, looting, robbing, fighting, and killing. It was even more intense than what had happened at the foot of the mountain. The sounds of fighting and killing could be heard everywhere. All sorts of miserable howls could be heard, making the place seem like hell on earth. Other than the people of the Scorching Sun Gang and the Nine Seals sect, there were many martial practitioners who were not affiliated with the sect, wantonly looting. Among them, there were some who were skilled and powerful. Their attacks were swift and ruthless, decisive and merciless. It was the same even when facing the disciples of the Scorching Sun Gang. In Wujiang County, following the destruction of the Nine Seals sect, the Scorching Sun Gang would inevitably rise and become the dominant force. However, not all of these martial practitioners were from Wujiang County. Some were just coincidentally traveling there, some were from the surrounding counties, and many were even bandits and pirates. They were not afraid of offending the Scorching Sun Gang. What they valued more were treasures, martial arts manuals, and even armors and weapons. Ziyue killed a martial practitioner who did not know better and intended to take advantage of the chaos. He reached out and touched the man's backpack. While no one was paying attention, he activated his mentality. The backpack disappeared as he kept it in his storage bag. Spiritual energy. 215410. Looking at the amount of spirit energy, Bai Ziyue revealed a satisfied smile. Even if some of the spiritual energy did not increase due to the distance, 210,000 points of spiritual energy was more than enough for him. It was enough to increase his strength by a large margin. Next, it's time for me to think about finding the 11th piece of golden paper. To Ziyue, the most important thing was undoubtedly the spiritual energy points. This was because it was related to whether his strength could be increased quickly. With sufficient spiritual energy points, his thoughts were naturally placed on other things, such as collecting the 12 pieces of golden paper. He reached into his chest, and a piece of golden paper appeared in his hand. With a gentle touch of his mentality, it immediately triggered the tracking mark on it. Buzz. The whereabouts of the 11th piece of golden paper immediately appeared in his mind. The door of the treasury was embedded deep into the stone wall of Mount Yuhua. It was completely open, and there were more than 10 corpses lying on the ground. These corpses were all wearing the uniform of the Nine Seals sect. Judging from the waist tags on their bodies, these people from the Nine Seals sect were of high status. One of them was an elder-level figure. However, at this moment, they were all lying on the ground, without any signs of life. Inside the treasury, there were 7 or 8 burly men holding ice blades. They were quickly rummaging through the treasury, and very soon, various treasures were taken out by them. On the contrary, the mountain of silver and other items did not catch their attention. There was no other reason other than that they were too heavy. "Quick, that's enough. We can't take any more. Let's leave before the scorching sun gang completely overtakes us," the leader shouted. Then, he picked up 2 large chests and left with them without any hesitation. The others were shocked. They also picked up the chests and huge backpacks that contained the treasures. In the end, they reluctantly looked at the treasures in the treasury that they had not taken away in time and quickly left. Not long after they walked out of the treasury, the face of the leading cultivator changed. From afar, he saw a figure that seemed to be strolling leisurely up the mountain. The leader of the Scorching Sun Gang, Sky Blade Jiang Tao. He gritted his teeth and cursed under his breath. Then, he saw Jiang Tao's figure speed up and rush in their direction. He hurriedly shouted, "Scatter and escape. Take as many as you can." Then, he immediately chose a direction to escape. The other people with him were also experts who had been through many hardships in the Jianghu. Not only were they not weak, but their alertness was also not inferior to anyone else. Without any instructions, each of them scattered like birds and fled in all directions. The 13 eagles of North Yen? How dare you snatch food from the tiger's mouth in front of the Scorching Sun Gang? Go after them! Jiang Tao shouted. Like a flash of lightning, he rushed directly to the leader. Then, very quickly, there were figures chasing after him in all directions. There was no lack of elders and branch leaders among them. What a coincidence! The person holding the golden paper is actually approaching me at such a fast speed. This saves me a lot of trouble, and I can just wait here for the rabbit to show up. When Bai Ziyu sensed that the golden paper was moving quickly and was coincidentally rushing in his direction, he raised his eyebrows and immediately waited under a tree that was so large that it would be difficult for 3 people to wrap their arms around it. Chapter 221. In the blink of an eye, Ziyu saw a muscular middle-aged man with a long saber in one hand, a big box in the other, and a huge cloth bag on his back. He was leaping toward Ziyu in the whistling wind. The big box was obviously heavy. Blue veins popped out on his arms as he held it tightly. Even so, his speed was not slow. Every step he took covered a distance of 3 to 5 meters. His landing was silent and his footsteps left no traces. It was obvious that he had an extremely advanced lightness skill. A disciple of the Scorching Sun Gang happened to walk out of a house with a big bag on his back. He saw the burly man in front of him. Before he could react, he saw a blood-red long saber slashing toward him. Die! The burly man snorted coldly, but his figure had already flashed past. As for the ground, there was a corpse that was almost split in half. Third-rate expert. Ziyu's eyes opened slightly, but there was no change in his expression. He took a step and stood in the path of the burly man. Get lost! In an instant, the burly man rushed in front of Ziyu. His fierce eyes were filled with a bloodthirsty light. Without any hesitation, he swung his long saber and slashed out. This saber tore through the air like a blazing inferno. Even before the saber came close, one could already feel a searing heat surging toward them. It was as if what was charging toward them was not a saber but a gigantic beast that could spit out flames. Roaring flame saber. Ziyu raised his eyebrows. He took a step and raised his long saber. Clang! Ziyu's black god saber easily knocked away the opponent's long saber. It swept through the air like it was crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. Puff! How is this possible? The burly man paused and lowered his head in horror. He happened to see a huge wound below his chest. Dark red blood overflowed from his body like a centipede. Soon, his body was dyed red. Only then did he feel a boundless pain spreading in his body and mind. It was like a rolling wave that drowned his consciousness. Pung! Only then did the weight of the box become apparent. Following the death of the burly man, the box fell heavily to the ground, directly smashing the bluestone floor into pieces. Following the collision, the large chest split open with a loud bang, and a huge oval object that had clearly been smelted in the initial stages rolled out. This oval-shaped object rolled down like a heavy wheel. Pieces of the bluestone slabs cracked open, leaving behind clear marks on them. The oval object rolled for 2 to 3 meters before coming to a stop. Meteoric iron. Xiu's eyes flashed and a trace of surprise appeared on his face. This meteoric iron was extremely valuable. It was definitely a good material for refining treasured sabers and sword. This was a piece that was difficult to hold with both hands, especially after it had undergone preliminary smelting. If it was combined with 1 or 2 other precious materials of the same level, it could even be forged into a divine weapon by a master refiner. Huff huff, the wind howled. At this moment, a figure in a white robe could be seen in the distance. He was as fast as lightning and was rushing towards them. Almost at first glance, he saw the meteoric iron rolling on the ground. A scorching light flashed in his eyes and he shouted, "Stop!" Then, in a few leaps, he approached them. "Elder Gong? What is the meaning of this?" Xiu's figure paused. He looked at the person who had just arrived and spoke in an indifferent voice. "So it's you." Only then did Gong Changxing see Xiu's face clearly. A trace of murderous intent flashed in the depths of his eyes. However, he seemed to have some misgivings in his heart. He could not help but speak in a calm tone. "The sect has stipulated that all the loot from the destruction of the 9 Seals sect must be recorded and recorded. The items on this man came from the treasure vault at the back of the mountain of the 9 Seals sect. I need to take them back to complete the task." "Is that so? But it's better not to trouble Elder Gong with such matters. If there's really a need to record it, I won't keep it for myself." Xiu shook his head slowly and said, "This is a little tricky. The value of this meteoric iron is too high. I'm afraid that Guardian Bai won't be able to keep it." As he spoke, Gong Changxing's voice rose abruptly. A long sword pierced out like a graceful swan. Through the previous battle, he knew that Xiu was a person who cultivated immortal skills. He seemed to have hidden powerful talismans on him. The D family cultivator had been killed by his continuous stream of talismans. If they were 10 meters away, even if he was a second-rate expert who had unblocked 3 extraordinary meridians, he would not dare to act rashly. However, due to his previous momentum and his current silence, he was now within 5 meters of Xiu. For an expert like him, 5 meters was just a short distance. He could cross it in the blink of an eye. He was confident that he could kill Xiu before he could use his immortal skills. Although immortal skills were magical, they were not necessarily better than a martial artist. Not to mention, he had sent people to investigate and assassinate Xiu because of his grandnephew. He knew that Xiu's cultivation level was not high and his strength was limited because of his young age. "I was still hesitating at first. Since that's the case, I'll send you on your way and end our grudge." Xiu sighed. Without a sound, an invisible wave rushed out and entered Gong Changxing's mind. Spiritual art. Soul-stirring spike. Chi. Chi. Gong Changxing let out a miserable howl as his consciousness dissipated. By Xiu's swift and fierce sword strike, which was originally determined to win, became unstable and slack, allowing Bai Xiu to easily dodge it. A long saber flashed past as fast as lightning. Wait, spare me. Gong Chongqing endured the pain and shouted. However, Ziyue did not stop at all, as if he did not hear him. Puff! A head flew into the sky. The body of the elder of the Scorching Sun Gang, Gong Chongqing, fell to the ground. Blood flowed out and soon dyed the ground red. Just like that, a second-rate expert was easily killed by him. Ziyue looked around. This place was remote and covered by trees. No one could see clearly if they were further away. Naturally, they did not attract any attention. He quickly picked up the piece of meteoric iron. The moment he grabbed it, his expression changed slightly. It was at least 1,500 caddies. With a surge of his mental strength, the meteoric iron disappeared and reappeared in his storage bag. Then, he opened the huge cloth bag of the burly man from before. Sure enough, he found the 11th piece of golden paper in it. Feeling relieved, he kept it in his storage bag. After searching Gong Chongqing's corpse once more, Bai Ziyue's figure flashed and left quickly. The chaos on Mount Yuhua of the Nine Seals sect had gradually died down after noon. When the sun was about to set, there was almost no one from the Nine Seals sect left on Mount Yuhua. At the foot of Mount Yuhua, there were many elite guards of the Scorching Sun Gang on the road. There were even third-rate experts at every checkpoint. It was not easy for warriors of other forces to bring their loot down the mountain. Even if the disciples of the Scorching Sun Gang went down the mountain, they would have to open their loot and register it. Some precious items would even be kept. If they kept it for themselves, they would be convicted and punished according to the sect rules. Of course, the rewards and punishments were fair. Whether it was secret manuals or gold, silver or jewels, as long as they entered the account, they would be credited with contribution points. It was not a big loss. However, such things could not be banned. Whether or not one could pass the test depended on one's own ability. With the help of the storage bag, Ziyue had kept a lot of things for himself. In addition, he had shown in the previous battle and attracted the admiration and respect of countless people. Even if the person in charge of the registration saw that he had kept something for himself, he did not dare to ask. "Guardian Bai, you've finally come down the mountain. I've been waiting for you here for a while." Not long after he left the registration office, a figure came looking for him and said, "Dog Pei? What's the matter? Weren't you with Wu Ma? Where is he?" Ziyue raised his eyebrows in surprise and asked. "The battlefield was chaotic. When the battle started, I split up with him. When I found him, he was already..." Dog Pei's face was filled with sorrow and his tone became low. Ziyue narrowed his eyes and felt a little sad. However, this was how the Battle of the Jianghu was. Wu Ma had not fully recovered from his injuries from the previous battle. This time, in order to witness the battle between the first-rate experts, he had ignored the advice and came. He had to be mentally prepared. If he died, he could not blame anyone. "Oh right, why are you looking for me?" Ziyue asked. "The gang leader is looking for you. Our clan leader is here too. He knows that I'm your subordinate and asked me to look for you here." Dog Pei said hurriedly. "The gang leader is looking for me?" Ziyue's eyes flashed, but he was not surprised. If he had not intervened in the battle, the Scorching Sun Gang would not have been able to defeat the Nine Seals sect, and the gang leader would not have been able to escape unscathed. The battle was chaotic and the gang leader had to kill the Nine Seals sect's experts to ensure victory. Hence, he did not have the chance to ask him. Now that the battle was over, it was natural that the gang leader would look for him. Lead the way. Similarly, Bai Ziyue did not hesitate and followed Pei Tuzi into the city. Soon, Ziyue and Dog Pei arrived at the headquarters of the Scorching Sun Gang. Bai Zai greets the gang leader. Soon, Ziyue stepped into the meeting room and saw the gang leader, who was giving out orders. After the recent battle, there were many internal affairs in the gang. Hence, there were not many people in the meeting room except for the gang leader. Elders and clan leaders were even rarer. "Protector Bai, you've really surprised me this time," Bai Yunfei said with a smile. Seeing Bai Ziyu, Jiang Tao immediately stood up and looked at him with bright eyes. It was as if he wanted to see through Bai Ziyu. Tell me, what should I do with you now that is better than what you have done this time? You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.